Chapter 181. When reality hits, Northern, after a couple of minutes, managed to stand himself up and slowly walked away. As he went on, farther away from the hall, he slowly recovered his strength. After a while, he arrived at the dungeon. Since he paid attention to the direction, he didn't need help going there. There were some guards, of course, at the entrance, who immediately stopped him the moment they saw him unchained. As they crossed their spears across the entrance, one of them inquired with a baritone voice, "What are you doing? Where do you think you're going, lad?" Northern looked at him for a second. He looks old. No way he can be a student. Sometimes it was easy to forget that not only students existed in the castle. And so, every guard or drifter he saw may or may not be a student. I think the students were particularly selected into parties. They were just his thoughts. Anyway, don't you recognize me? I'm the prisoner from before, and I've been released. I want to say a few words to my friend there, and I'll leave. The two of them looked at each other for a few seconds. I do recognize you. That white hair is uncommon. You were escorted away just a few moments ago. But how am I to be sure you didn't just escape and have plans of breaking out your friend too? Northern showed them his freed hands. If I did, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. See, my hands are not chained. Even after saying that to them, they still wrought heavy concerns on their faces. Looking at them, Northern spoke again. See, if you were so confused, then just follow me. They looked at each other. Then the older-looking one responded, "Fine, I'll follow you, but you can't stay long." With a curt nod to his partner, he took Northern into the dungeon hallway. After a few minutes' walk, they finally got to where Ellis was held. The poor guy was standing in front of the bars, holding them while waiting for when his partner in crime was going to come back. Immediately, he saw Northern. He exclaimed in joy, "You're back." Then his tone drifted low as his eyes saw Northern's hands. "And you've been released?" "Yes, I've been released. Do you want me to rot with you in there?" Ellis smiled with his eyes, scratching the back of his head. "Not at all, sir. Not at all. I'm really glad you've been released." Northern stared squarely at him first. Then, after a few breaths, he stepped closer and said, "Listen, you'll be called soon for an interrogation. I don't care how you'll do it, but if you tell them any of my secrets, including Dark Terror, I promise to kill you or make your life a living hell." Ellis shuddered for a moment, seeing the deathly glow in Northern's eyes. For some reason, it was more vicious than several other times and sent chills across his bloodstream. Don't worry. I'll never betray you," Ellis stammered. "Good." Having passed the message, Northern stepped away from the iron bars. "So, where are you going now?" He turned from Ellis and responded as he walked away. "To vent my frustration on a couple of monsters." The forest was eerily quiet. The only sound the crunch of leaves under Northern's boots as he stalked ahead. His eyes were glassy, mind adrift in a fog of frustration as his body moved on autopilot. A twig snapped behind him. Northern spun, stilettos flashing in his hands, as a pack of hunched, snarling beasts burst into the clearing. They were like massive hyenas, all rippling muscle and malformed jaws packed with rows of jagged fangs. Corpse eaters. One of them had black beady eyes, quite distinct from the rest, and locked its eyes on Northern. Suddenly, it let out a guttural roar, and the others echoed the cry, a cacophony of rage that should have shaken a sane man to his core. But Northern didn't flinch. He simply stared back, face impassive, as the alpha charged. With contemptuous ease, Northern sidestepped the beast's attack. His left stiletto lashed out, burying itself in its shoulder. It howled in pain and skidded past, hindquarters nearly taking Northern's legs out from under him. He didn't pause, couldn't pause. Two more were already on him, whipping their heads like demented cobras as they tried to rip his flesh with those raking fangs. Northern dropped into a crouch, letting the snapping jaws pass scant inches above him. One of the stilettos caught the closer monster in the throat as it sailed over his head. Blood sprayed from the grievous wound, splattering Northern's face and armor. The beast crumpled, thrashing wildly in its death throes. The other brute landed hard, jaws clapping shut on empty air. It pivoted with startling quickness, putrid spittle flying from its maw as it flung itself at Northern again. This time he didn't dodge. Dropping his weight, he let the creature's own momentum impale it on his upraised dagger. His arm shuddered from the impact, but he held firm as the points of his stiletto punched through the back of its skull in a gory spray of bone and brain matter. Northern wrenched his blade free, emotionless eyes scanning for the next threat as the lifeless body sagged at his feet. The pack backed off for a heartbeat, growling and snapping in consternation as their numbers dwindled. The reprieve was fleeting. 3 more rushed Northern in a ferocious wave of gnashing teeth and whipping claws. He met them halfway. Steel flashed, weaving chemtrails of scarlet droplets through the air as Northern danced among the beasts. He was a dervish of whirling blades, stabbing and slashing with cold precision. Ichor sprayed with each brutal cut and thrust. One monster went down with a ragged gash across its hamstrings, tendons parting like frayed rope. It crashed to the loam, still snarling impotently as its companions trampled over it. Northern seized the opening, burying both blades in the back of the closest brute. It bucked and twisted but couldn't dislodge him as those razor-sharp daggers burrowed inexorably deeper into its vital organs. A contemptuous wrench severed its spine, and it collapsed like a slab of fallen masonry. The last monster faltered in the wake of such brazen savagery. Northern closed the distance in 2 strides, eyes hollow and pitiless. The daggers could mete out no mercy to the piteous creature. A minute later, their corpses lay strewn about the clearing amidst the mounting stench of voided bowels and viscera. Chapter 182 Moment of Reproach. Name, Northern Longguard. True name, nameless. Attributes, formless, spawn of void, limitless void, vestige of chaos and void. All eyes, chaos thread, flames of chaos. Soul rank, drifter. Talent fragments, 84 out of 2000. Copied talents, 1/2. Own talents, 1. Attribute abilities, active/passive. September 10th. Owned items, Mortal Blade, Eternal Twilight, Silver Sword, Death Glare, and 4 others. Northern stared blankly at the panel floating before his eyes. They were evidences of his weakness. He had no talent, no soul core, no edge on fundamental learning. To put it in a word, he was trash. That was what he just got reminded of. His entire experience in the Rift, he focused on just one single thing: survival. He tried to protect himself a lot by not fighting. Even times when he did, he was overridden by madness. Perhaps this much of his growth was owed to the fact that he was insane. If he was sane, would he have fought as much? Would he not have given up or ran away? Because all he cared about was surviving. He thought that was the only way to fight to survive. Even when he wanted to grow stronger, it was to have a higher stake of survival. The only case he fought out of pure grudge and necessity to overcome was when he fought his nemesis, Night Terror. And it couldn't as much be called a fight. The poor thing was in a weakened state, and luck was a vital play in how he won the fight. While he had hauled himself a little by persistence, he had been carried all through by luck. It didn't matter whether it was true or not. It was how he felt right now. And it made him utterly disgusted at himself. Everyone in that hall probably had it easier than he did. Even if they didn't, they at the very least were not alone. Yet they turned out to be strong in their lane. And he, who strived in a hell, living every day without knowing when his end might be, given every opportunity and environment to let go of his fear of death and become stronger, found strength in fear of death, embraced it as a powerful tool for survival. Seeing these party leaders made him want to take a reproaching stance on everything. I have been complacent, too complacent. He dislodged his dagger from the corpse eater lying lifelessly on the ground. And there is no use sulking about it. He lifted his gaze to the others that were beginning to slowly move back, his eyes shimmering with a terrifying blue hue. Something was getting ignited inside of him. Maybe the monsters could see it, Maybe they could just perceive how increasingly dangerous he was becoming. But they sure saw something. And that something made them cower in fear. Northern looked at his blood-stained hands. This time, he wasn't putting on the gloves. He dismissed the daggers and summoned the mortal blade. Just after the weapon materialized into his hands, 2 clones appeared on his left and right, each of them equipped with a dagger each. He looked to his left, he looked to his right, then he looked straight forward. Wham! Northern's legs scuttled across the clearing, leaving his clones in its wake. He appeared before the foremost corpse eaters. Perceiving him so close, the creature shot its neck forward, clasping crude jagged teeth on Northern. Only for the image of its target to slowly dissipate into thin air. Northern from the side swung a full-blown arc, separating the monster's neck from the rest of its body in just one swing. You have slain hazardous savage corpse eater. You have gained +2 talent fragments. Before he was done with the monster, with complete awareness of his space, he had perceived 2 more coming at him. As the corpse eater fell, Northern's free hand shot forward, blurring as a ghostly blade weaved itself to reality and impeded the monster ahead. Northern wrenched the blade free and with a forward twirl, dealt a double, diagonal slash on the 3rd target. He twirled the ghostly blade and stabbed it into the already standing corpse eater, then plunged mortal blade deep into his last slay. He wrenched both swords free in a spill of black blood that smeared his face and armor. Then he turned to look at the 2 clones. Oh wow! They are doing well. Although their movements and skills, if he could put it into words, they were somewhat diluted compared to when it was just the clone that later became a body for Dark Terror. Northern paused and thought for a moment. Could there have been a chance that the reason why Dark Terror is so skillful is because of the clone itself? Northern's Singularity clone had been seared with so much battle experience, but Dark Terror was as much terrifying, so he didn't really give it the thought before. But seeing these ones now, he couldn't help but permit the notion. Dark Terror is truly an amazing monster, no doubt. Northern tried to remember Dark Terror's first fight after he took over the clone. It was the definition of a menace. The grin it gave to those humans. Crap, it really has to be the case. There's no other explanation. However, something else bothered Northern. He swung his hand, rendering a vertical slash to the monster that lunged towards him. The creature reeled back like a log of wood but quickly recomposed itself and dashed at him again. But Northern was already in motion, meeting the monster before it barely counted 4 steps and plunging the ghostly blade into its mouth. He skillfully turned the mortal blade and buried it into the side of its neck. The monster wriggled voraciously and fell too. You have slain disastrous savage corpse eater. You have gained +2 talent fragments. Your clone has slain hazardous savage corpse eater. You have gained +2 talent fragments. Your clone has slain hazardous savage corpse eater. You have gained +2 talent fragments. Chapter 183. Growth is inevitable. Your clone has slain hazardous savage corpse eater. You have gained +2 talent fragments. Your clone has slain hazardous savage corpse eater. You have gained +2 talent fragments. Another thing Northern was thinking about was exactly these. I did remember it correctly. I can gain talent fragments when my clones hunt for me, right? His memory about it was a bit fuzzy. Perhaps that was due to the effect of the madness on his mental fortitude. But it had been particularly hard recalling some things before the moment he went into that state of madness and was unaware of what and how he acted during that period. However, he was sure now that his very late premonition was not wrong. At the same time, what baffled him was that, if that was the case, then why am I not getting any talent fragments from Dark Terror? The devil was probably somewhere hunting for more monsters. Even he had seen the traces of its hunt while he was on his way to this forest. The forest that bordered the capital city to the north. Dark Terror had slain a lot as per his commands. He had even seen some enormous-sized monsters laying lifelessly on the ground. Ah, crap. That reminds me. Northern immediately turned and summoned 2 more clones. Then he removed his bag, which was handed to him after he was released, and gave it to one of them. Go back and harvest all the cores for me. How could I seriously forget about that? He turned, facing the rest of the monsters. They were already far behind, stuck in between running or trying their luck. While corpse eaters are spineless monsters with barely any commendable amount of brazenness, they are also driven by an extreme hunger for flesh, most especially dead flesh. But they also don't mind the one that is alive and well. That extreme hunger that burns in them is the reason for their hesitation to run. The reason why they kept snarling viciously at Northern even though they were withdrawing deeper into the forest. Ah, damn it! Northern dashed towards them in reckless abandon, bearing the mortal blade in one hand, the soul taker on the other. The mortal blade carved a vicious upward arc, cleaving through the underside of the lead monster's jaw and erupting out the top of its neck in a gory spray. Its jaws hung askew, black blood and shards of bone raining down as it crumpled to the ground. The group broke ranks in a frenzy, realizing too late the mistake of underestimating their prey. Northern was already among them, Soul Taker flashing a ghostly light with brutal precision. A beast to his right staggered as the razor-edged weapon laid open its ribs in a ragged slash. Ichor sprayed Northern's face, the coppery tang of it invading his nostrils and mouth as he pressed the assault. He spun, blades whirling in an intricate dance of death, parrying snapping jaws and raking claws with almost contemptuous ease. Bathed in the darkness of the night, Northern continued, swinging both blades endlessly, 2 clones by his side, 2 more picking all the soul cores from behind. The night paid silent heed to his rueful vent of frustration as it persisted throughout, till twilight. Huff, huff, huff. Crap, why the hell? Huff, are there so many monsters? Huff, in this forest. Northern's face was covered in dry black blood. His eyelids were gladly closed, although his eyeballs still carried a dangerous azure glow. But they were dim. Damn, I'm tired. He had been angrily fighting, hunting with just one purpose in mind. Growth. He just wanted to grow so badly. He wanted to change his circumstances up until now. He wanted to never face such an embarrassing situation again. Such a humbling situation. He staggered tiredly to the front, almost falling down but supported himself with the mortal blade, stabbing it into the ground, using the momentum of his slight stagger. He plunged the Soul Taker into the exposed flank of the monster before him. In just one hit, the monster wriggled and died. In his few hours of his endless fight with the corpse eaters, Northern, although tired now, had ended up discovering far more than he usually would. First was the use of item orders. He had totally forgotten about it since he was very blessed with abilities and had a broad option to choose from. Realizing now that the majority of his abilities couldn't be seen, some he hadn't even had a complete hang of. For example, even though Formless looked like an ability that would really benefit him the most, he didn't even know how to consciously activate it. Whatever had happened with how just happened before he could recount what was going on. But he didn't need to sulk on the things he couldn't control. If there was one thing he was sure about, it was the fact that he would get it. However, he still needed to explore all the possibilities of strength that he carried. The most he had forgotten were weapon orders. Name: Eternal Twilight. Type: Armor. Rank: Enchanted. Order: 1. Description: The Twilight usually donned this armor with pride. Oh, how joyful he looked when he marched to war at the dawn of the day and rode back on the helm of victory at dusk. What is left of it now is corruption and carnage. Weapon order: Mistwalker. Mistwalker. The white and brown leather armor releases thin wisps of fog and dust from its seams. You can teleport to areas within the fog. Once this ability has been used, it can't be used again until dawn. Since he was a walker and had an unrefined soul essence, he was not able to use this weapon order, but Northern had also forgotten about it. Plus, he gained a better armor, didn't he? And now, thanks to the embarrassment he faced, he began to consider ways to make himself stronger, better than a minute ago. A hunger that he never really had began to be birthed inside his bowels. This caused him to inspect every aspect of himself while he fought. He even had to dismiss his clones since they were eating up his reserve of void essence. Eventually, being driven into a tight corner caused him to use a particularly powerful order of the mortal blade. Name: Mortal Blade. Type: weapon. Rank: superior. Order: 2. Description: blinded by his greed for supreme power, the insane monarch laid waste to his entire kingdom, making of it nothing but an ocean of blood. Weapon abilities: Blood Reaver. Last Blood. Blood Reaver. Mortal Blade will absorb blood from its target to heal the wounds of its wielder. However, the blood must be crimson. Last Blood. When the wielder is at the point of death, Mortal Blade might exchange the blood state of its wielder for that of its target. However, a hit must be made before this ability can be activated. Last Blood activated just at his peak of fatigue when he was about to die. The gruesome blade moved like a mad weapon, as if possessing his hand for a minute. It impaled the monster and dried its entire blood, healing Northern's wounds and fatigue. That was eventually how Northern was able to survive the night. But that one experience caused him to remember all the orders of his items. Even though he couldn't use Blood Reaver since the blood of the corpse eaters was not crimson, he could use others like Mistwalker and even the shadow restraining effect of one of his stilettos. Name: Northern Longguard. True name: Nameless. Attributes: Formless. Spawn of Void. Limitless Void. Vestige of Chaos and Void. All Eyes. Chaos Thread. Flames of Chaos. Soul Rank: Drifter. Talent Fragments: 276/2000. Copied Talents: 1/2. Own Talents: 1. Attribute Abilities: Active/Passive. September 10th. Owned Items: Mortal Blade, Eternal Twilight, Silver Sword, Death Glare, and 4 others. Not enough. Huff. No, that's enough. A cold voice rang out from behind him. With a slight frown, heaving and panting roughly, in a battered state, hair and face bloodied, Northern slowly turned. A black-haired lady was standing, bathed in the orange radiance of the twilight. Her crimson eyes were coldly piercing his soul. You, what are you doing here? Chapter 184. Anywhere Sleeper. Northern did not know what exactly it was she was doing here or why she was even here in the first place. Not that he cared, but he was in a very non-presentable state right now. Right now, he was at his lowest of the low, his downtime. Raven slowly trudged forward to him. Seeing that Northern frowned and slowly moved his sword a little. She stopped and folded her hands, speaking to him with unwavering confidence. What are you doing? I have searched the entire city for you. Northern's brow came together in distrust. Searched for me? Why would you search for me? Why else? I needed to give you an answer. Her response was straight-toned, not betraying any hint of emotions. Answer. Northern's response, on the other hand, was slow, both in tone and emotion. Terrence decided to give up half of the soul cores. Is that fair with you? Northern was silent for a couple of seconds. Then he responded finally, albeit slowly. Ah, I see. Raven's brow furrowed slightly at his unceremonious reaction, but she disregarded it immediately, even with her facial expression. We'll be moving tomorrow at dawn. It's supposed to be today, but... She paused, looking at him from up to down. You are clearly in no state to move anywhere. Her voice rang out once more. Lael, have all the rest you can get. I'll also need to debrief you on what exactly we are doing before we go. So that means we'll meet at midnight. Don't worry, I'll come find you. She completed her statement and turned around but paused before she took a step. She looked over her shoulder and said to Northern, You are not weak. Go easy on yourself and rest. Moreover, this expedition will be a great chance for you to grow. Look forward to it. Then she walked away slowly and beautifully. Her figure even seemed to disappear into the embrace of the twilight. Northern stood there for a couple of minutes, motionless and silent. Before he finally remembered. She called me Lael again. He gritted his teeth, but there was no use. He didn't even feel as angry as he used to about it, and that was strange. Gritting his teeth just now felt like a faked anger. It was strange, very strange. He turned around. In the meantime, all the monsters had scurried away. They were not much to begin with since he had almost completely cleansed the forest. But at least there were a few. I guess I should just rest here, huh? Not to say, he could vividly feel the drastic increase in his strength. It was as if every time he gained talent fragments, his physical stats built up. And over 200 talent fragments in one night was a drastic change, one that caused him to vividly feel his difference in strength. At least the growth is visible. Northern dismissed his blades, leaving them to disintegrate into black shards of sparks. I guess I should go home. First I should harvest the soul cores. He summoned 2 clones and commanded them as usual, and also gave a mental command to Dark Terror to return, since the devil was a huge part of the reason why he got so tired during his fight. Dark Terror, after all, still needed a chunk of his void essence to materialize. It was a manageable amount, but in a situation where he was working at full power, it took a great toll on him. Northern fell to the ground and laid facing the sky, slowly breathing as his clones harvested the soul cores. He was gazing at the orange glow that slowly seeped out of the embrace of the clouds. It was as if the clouds were gradually and dramatically revealing the radiant glow of the day star. Northern admired its beauty for a moment, however, the next moment, his eyes were closed, slowly and peacefully breathing, asleep. His eyes slowly fluttered open, for 2 reasons. 1, he had had enough sleep. His muscles still ached here and there, but he had rested so much and thankfully had regained much of his vigor. 2nd, was the figure that seemed to be blocking the ray of the sun that was entering his eyes. While Northern felt too asleep to wake up, he was somewhat concerned that someone might be trying to steal from him or harm him. A subconscious thought that managed to cause him to wake, even though he was so deeply asleep. As he opened his eyes, the image of the person bending over him was at first blurry. But with the passing of the seconds, it got clearer and Northern could see. "Ellis!" He called out softly and propped himself up. "You really made a mess of this place, huh?" A thick voice rang out from the side. Since he still felt lightheaded, Northern took a few seconds before he turned around. Ellis was crouching and Hao was right behind him, barely taller though. "What are you guys doing here? We've been looking all over for you." "Why?" A quizzical arch formed on Ellis' brow. "What do you mean why? We have a transaction to finish." Northern stared blankly at Ellis for a few seconds. "Don't worry. You can be rest assured that I revealed none of your secrets. I took the courage to tell them about what that bastard had been doing. But I think they accepted it after I told them my secret because they kept pestering me about what I was hiding." Northern looked away for a moment, hiding his grin. "Will you look at those bastards?" Anyway, after telling it to them and showing them, Lady Raven said she would like me to join her party. She also said she would take full responsibility for my growth. Ellis exhaled into the air and inhaled sweetly. "Lady Raven, she's an angel." Northern looked at him, his face contorted by peak disgust and irritation. "Will both of you stop goofing and wasting my time?" Hao's thick voice interrupted. "Ah, right." Ellis stood up finally, dusting his dirty trousers. "Hao said he has something very special for you." He stretched his hand to the white-haired boy sitting on the floor. Northern stared at Ellis' hand for a couple of beats before taking it and standing up. He looked at Hao. "You have something for me? What could it be?" The short man shrugged and turned around. "Just let's go." Chapter 185. Down the pathway. Northern and Ellis continued to follow Hao, silently at first. But after Northern noticed that they kept going deeper into the forest rather than going out of it, and Ellis seemed to have no idea what was going on, he decided to speak up. "I'm sorry. Where are we going again?" "Shut up and follow me." "Yeah, but the way back to the castle is back. This should only lead us out of the capital, I guess." "I said shut your mouth." Northern frowned slightly. "I'm really beginning to have my fill of this man." He decided to just walk silently, for now. The forest only grew thicker as they walked within it. Northern could have sworn he never ever thought the forest was so large. He had just made a presumption that it was a small partition that separated the northern border of the city from whatever lay beyond. Lothelwyn is a kingdom with 4 cities. including the kingdom capital. It was situated in the southwestern edge of the continent of Stelia, although it was still barricaded from the oceans by a massive canyon. The intercities were surrounded by thick forests, which was a quite weird and concerning terrain structure, considering the presence of a canyon at their southwestern edge and a vast desert to their northeastern side. The three of them trekked silently, Ellis and Northern following How from behind. The walk took quite the time, almost stretching into an hour before they eventually reached a clearing, which was occupied by a wooden hut. Northern skeptically looked around, then hastened his step to match How's. "Look, I get that we are trying to have a transaction and you have something special for me, but I'm beginning to second-guess your intentions. This place is looking very shady." How stopped and turned, casting a stern glare at him. "There's nothing shady about this place, and this is my main item store." Northern and Ellis looked at him in a little bewilderment mixed with confusion. Then Northern spoke. "Why would you separate your items? You don't trust the castle. The number one code of a trader is not to trust anybody. Moreover, your friend here and his past boss have really done some trashy things to me." Ellis lowered his head in defeat. "I am very sorry, sir. I was forced, and it was all his command." Northern exchanged his eyes between the two of them, blinking first, then a small smile formed on his face. Whatever it is, it looked like they've sorted it out. Since Ellis and How came together, it was safe to assume that they could have trashed whatever was between them. The way How spoke also gave away the fact that he probably understood Ellis' predicament. "I'm still curious, though, but I guess that can wait." How trudged forward with a serious face. "If you are bringing us here, does that mean you trust us?" Northern intoned, walking behind the short man. How gritted his teeth a little. "Don't kid yourself. I'd never trust a shady kid like you. I just owe you, and I gotta pay what I owe." Northern's brow furrowed slightly in confusion. "Oh? You don't owe me anything, though. Wasn't I the one that wanted to conduct a transaction?" How smacked his lips and ignored Northern. They finally got to the entrance of the hut. The man bent down and used his hands to separate the loam and dug through. After digging for a while, he stood up with a rusting key in his dirty hand. "Wow, he's quite thorough." Northern watched in silence as the man plunged the key into the keyhole on the door and made some very confusing twists. Then the door clicked and creaked open. Immediately, they were assaulted by a cloud of dust that caused them to take a couple of steps back. How, however, went in regardless, walking through the assault with apathy. Northern and Ellis quickly followed. Northern summoned the white orb of light, but before it could finish weaving itself into existence, How clapped, and immediately, the entire place birthed a warm radiance. Everything became illuminated. Northern's orb of light still ended up adding a slight glow to the warmth of the room. Woo! Ellis couldn't keep his mouth closed with what was unveiled before his eyes. The interior was an array of shelves, and in those shelves were different boxes. The boxes aside, there were smaller wooden hangers that held different necklaces, rings, and gauntlets. To another side, swords and armor hung on the wall, filling the space with a war aesthetic glamour. Although all these things were also coated by dust, they still shimmered with an alluring radiance. Northern couldn't take his eyes off the necklaces. The swords, too, were nice. Even though he had Mortal Blade and Soul Taker, he didn't mind adding these ones to his collection. He just wanted to have them all. Their silent moment of adoration was put to an abrupt stop when Hal slammed a box on the table that sat in the middle of the room. "Here is what I have," he announced. The two of them turned around. Hal then slowly opened the box. Immediately, a subtly silver glow entered Northern's eyes so much that he had to close them for a moment before opening. This is a heroic rank item. A charm item, to be precise, with 6 orders. Northern's mouth fell open. Even Knight Terror armor is 4 orders. This meant whatever this item was, it outdid his Knight Terror armor, which was heroic rank and order 4. An order 6 item. Wow, I can't wait to see what it does. Northern's eyes gleamed greedily. Before I show this to you, however, I want to propose something. Northern was already licking his lips inwardly, but had to pause and stare at Hal, who was looking like he was about to be dubious. "What? Are you trying to change your mind?" Hao sighed and responded, "No, this item is too much of a prize. Sometimes I don't want to part with it. If you'll be making a decision to take it, I'll be exchanging it for all your items. Deal or no deal?" Northern erased the greedy gleam from his face and glowered at Hao. "Why? Do you know the potency of the items I have with me? Why would you make such a suggestion and expect that I accept it?" Hao smiled. His smile, however, wasn't anything short of hideous. He had a bony and strong face. That smile could scare away a monster. In fact, "You're talking like that because you don't know yet. When you own it, you're going to thank me heavily." Northern skeptically looked at Hao for a couple of seconds. "I guess he is trying to establish an agreement since you can't see the info about an item until you own it. But that's not the case with me." Northern looked down at the silver necklace. Immediately, its details originated before his eyes. Northern's mouth fell open. He almost let out a loud gasp. "Crazy! This is crazy!" Chapter 186. The Transaction. Item. Name. Lullaby of Selene. Type. Charm. Rank. Heroic. Order. 6. Description. A bride given to the sea urchin sang her last song of death. It was beautiful and enchanting. Even in her departing, she left her treasured ones with melodies of love. Charm abilities. Star-eyed. Overseer's might. 9 lives. Song of seas. Breathe of seas. Lost path. First of all, the fact that he saw the information regarding the item just as he normally would if the item was his once again proved Ellis' ability to be amazing. Northern couldn't help but bless the day they met. In fact, his momentary sentiment made him look at Ellis with shining eyes, causing the latter to frown in confusion. "What? The decision is yours to make. I can't do that to him." Of course, Ellis would have thought that Northern wanted him to check the abilities of the item before they went further with any negotiations. But for someone who had offended Hao once already, this was unfair. So he was pretty determined not to. Northern looked back at the item nonchalantly. He knew what direction Ellis' line of thought had taken, but right now he didn't care. He didn't care about any misunderstanding at all, because this amulet in front of him was indeed a heroic rank item with 6 orders. 6. If he gained this, it would be the best item in his soul shelf. "Calm down. Let's not rush this. Let me stylishly inspect the orders." Northern focused his eyes on the necklace, internally using the see ability. The panel reappeared about it. But that was all. No matter how much he tried to look down, squinted his eyes and activated it over and over again, nothing happened. Time was now beginning to go, and the eerie silence in the small hut was beginning to get bothersome. So Hao had to ask, "So what's your decision? You getting it or nay?" Northern was left in a dilemma. "It's cool, but all my items." While he had seen some signs that this was undoubtedly going to be an impressive item, he still thought giving all his items just for this one was too much. He finally removed his eyes from the necklace and turned to Hao. "I know this item is amazing, as you have said, but all my items, isn't that too much?" Hao folded his arms. "This item is just as important. It's a real treasure, you know?" Hao paused for a second and continued. "The only reason why I'm showing it to ya is because your brat managed to impress me." Geez, sometimes his accent can be tiring to listen to. Not like he could dare complain to his face. Hao had a distinct accent in his tongue, even though they all spoke a common language. It is true that natives of Stelia did have an accent that hinted took the grammar construction and even some certain use of words down another path from what people of the Central Plains knew. But Hao's was extreme, hinting at a more deeper origin than just anyone. Northern couldn't quite pinpoint the feeling, but he knew Hao was a different man, sort of like a gem perhaps. "Fine, I'll give you one more item. It's not as impressive as this, but it's also impressive." Northern nodded quickly with a big smile on his face. Hao exhaled and walked to the side of the shelf. He bent down and pulled out a box which he opened, and then after a couple of navigating through a noisy sound of metal, he stood up with something in his hands. Northern's brow drifted up in puzzlement. It was a black cloth like a rag in fact, but before he judged, he used C. Having this ability really does make a lot of things easier for me. Item. Name. Shadow Cloak. Type. Charm. Rank. Arcane. Order. 3. Description. One time, the shadows were a veil that walked amidst men. They dressed and moved as one of us. However, they were betrayed. Charm abilities. Frigid darkness. Black veil. Shadow step. Wow! This was another gem. But more than that, something particularly bugged Northern's mind, that even made his celebration short-lived. Why does the description sound like it's being narrated by a man? Is this a new thing, or I've just not been noticing? So, what do you think? Northern nodded and gave a thumbs up. I think I'll take the 2. For all ya items, Hao added. Yes, for all my items, Northern responded, a small smile leaving its traces on his face. He moved his eyes to Ellis and nodded. Immediately, Ellis stepped forward and summoned a sword first. The transaction continued while Northern continued to look around the place. While they were amazing, he felt Hao was being sincere. Those 2 were really his best items. But why would he just give them to me like that? He wondered. Seriously, it was beginning to seem shady now that he thought about it. Am I being led into some kind of trap? Come to think of it, his actions since the beginning have been suspicious. I mean, he brought us to some strange place outside the capital city. Ha! Quite interesting. These are actually interesting items. I'm not disappointed. Northern turned to Hao as he made the comment. Can I have mine now? He asked politely. Ah, yes. Hao took the robe first and passed it to Northern. Immediately, Northern could feel an addition in his soul. It wasn't a feeling that could be put into words. It was a feel every drifter knew. Then Hao took the amulet. He looked at the sparkling silver pendant and sighed, then passed it to Northern. I can tell it hurts him to pass it. The charm item was amazing enough already, and if by further inspection, it turned out to be more amazing, it meant Hao had indeed given him a great treasure, which furthermore reinforced the question. Why? Northern, for a couple of minutes, stared tentatively at Hao, who was just doing his thing, packing back the boxes. Ellis moved closer to him and whispered, Is everything okay? Your glare is piercing. Yeah, I know. Northern dismissed the necklace in his hand, as he had done with the cloth earlier, then he folded his arms. A couple of beats later, his voice rang out. Hao! What? Hao responded as he crouched and pushed the box back beneath the shelf. Northern's brow slowly furrowed as his lips parted. Why? Hey! Ellis silently urged him. But Northern completely ignored him, his eyes fixed on Hao's back. Why are you doing this? I don't understand why you will give your best possessions to someone you barely even know. Ellis felt like he was going to die of a heart attack one day. Why? Why? Why do you have to ask that? Chapter 187. Thoughtful Northern. Ellis rolled his lips in, hoping that Hao does not snap and take everything back. It was very rare to find a transaction like this, and Northern might not know, but he knew Hao's nature. The man is rumored to be a sagacious trader who could smell riches. Many often take it as an overpraise since Hao was just really good at what he does. And Ellis had hoped that this was just another of Hao's trader antics kicking in, and hoped that everything just went smoothly without Northern saying anything. Why? He has a very crazy temper. Very crazy. I can only pray, that is if Allah is benevolent enough to bestow upon us mercy, because this guy is just crazy. Hao was infamous even amongst the party leaders and the entire castle. He is the only one that doesn't get fed by whatever the parties hunt and has a really bad record with the party leaders, and Ellis has no idea why. What he knew very well, though, was that Hao had once come to the castle and caused a massive uproar. And this was not even when he was stolen from. He could vividly remember how Hao flipped and ripped an enormous table that used to be in the center of the main hall. It used to be where people gathered to eat. But it wasn't there when Northern entered. That was all due to Hao's anger tantrums. The reasons were unknown. Ellis, after all, was too mundane of a person to know such privileged information. But memories of it had kept a fear of Hao in him, and now that everything was going nice, he didn't just want to mess it up. Hao, on the other hand, just stood up silently. Not even an ounce of sound dropped from him until he turned and looked up. His face was bony and stiffened, but his eyes, for some reason, were very accommodating. Ellis observed him with a slight frown. Why is he looking like that? He was unsure what to think. Then Hao smiled. Ellis felt goosebumps crawl on his skin at the sight of the grotesque smile. Seriously? Oblivious of Ellis' rampaging thoughts, Hao answered Northern. I come from a prestigious family of traders. My father was a Duke of Lothelwyn and was a very smart trader. There are records of him handling massive deals with different nations, even with Luingard Empire. He was able to go far and do so much by sniffing. Northern retracted his head with taut lines of confusion forming on his pale forehead. Sniffing? Hao continued, his lips still betraying faded reminiscent of his previous smile. Let's just say, we are really good at following our instincts. Northern raised his chin a little, his eyes assessing Hao's words. Then can I ask you a favor? Hao folded his arms and raised a corner of his lips. Humph. You're going to ask a trader for a favor? Northern looked down and looked back at Hao. I guess. It's not anything hard. It doesn't matter. The point is that one good favor deserves another. I work with exchange. If your favor is something I can do, then I will do it. But I will also be expecting a favor from ya. Isn't that a given? That way, I'd not necessarily feel indebted to you. Hao nodded in agreement. I think ya and I are going to get along pretty well. Northern didn't know what, but those words immediately left a sour taste in his mouth. Somehow, I can't help but feel he's using me to plot something or he has an agenda, but at the very least, it doesn't feel harmful. But still, he couldn't be too complacent or trust anyone. So what's your favor? Hao asked with a small smile on his lips. I'll be leaving soon. While I'm gone, I want you to look out for Ellis and protect him. Ellis' eyes widened. Eh? What? Wait, what are you saying? He was caught in a spiraling moment of confusion. He didn't even know how to react to the level of absurdity that Northern had just spilled. Protect him? Look out for him? And how of all people? The same person he stole from? And moreover, where was he going? He didn't even tell me anything about this beforehand. Hao's voice resonated in the small room. Humph. I didn't particularly take you for the caring type. Northern tilted his head. I'm not, but I made a deal to protect him. Hao nodded. Humph. You at least look like the type that values and holds their words. He paused for a few moments and then responded. Well, that's fair. I have forgiven him for our past mishap. Even though he knew very well that he was a criminal before me, he still brought me an interesting customer. As a trader, I am grateful for that. His eyes drifted to Ellis, who was standing slightly behind Northern, almost shuddering. Hao glared at him fiercely. You better not be stealing from me. The loud warning caused Ellis' skin to jump. He almost staggered back. I wouldn't dare. It wasn't me that time. Hao's brow furrowed subtly, a hint of anger shadowing his expression. His voice rang out. I don't care what it was that time. Ellis lowered his head. Beneath, the corners of his mouth tightened imperceptibly. I didn't even agree to this. Damn it. Thank you, Northern said and tapped Ellis' shoulder. Let's go. Hao watched both of them leave his small item store until the door was shut. Immediately they stepped outside. Ellis stopped and glared at Northern's back. As if Northern could feel his glare piercing his back, he stopped his steps and turned around, not surprised to see Ellis' expression. What? He inquired. What do you mean, what? What was that in there? Ellis' tone rose a little, and he belatedly noticed, thanks to the slight frown that appeared in Northern's brows. I mean, you didn't even say anything to me about it, he added, politely this time. Northern let out an audible breath. I promised to protect you, Didn't I? Ellis nodded. Yes. I will be gone. I don't know how long, and I don't know if it will be possible for Dark Terror to be here. Where he can be is limited by distance. Since I don't know how far I'll be going, it's not a bad idea to make some preparations to protect you. Ellis still wore a slight frown after Northern's explanation. He was like a baby throwing unnecessary tantrums because their parents were about to go on an important journey. Northern placed his hand on Ellis' shoulder, his voice coming out firmly. Look, this is just the beginning of our work together. And I am not letting you die. You'll have to help me with more things when I come back. And because of that, you have to stay safe. So humbly accept the offer before I change my mind. Northern looked at House Hut, then gestured for Ellis to step closer. Confused, Ellis did so. Then Northern whispered into his ear. You can also work as his apprentice and stylishly begin to learn how to sniff too. Don't you think? Ellis' mouth dropped open. He was shocked. Northern whispered again. I mean, you are weak in combat. This could be a chance for you to add importance to yourself. It's all on you, though. I just thought that since he looks like a very prestigious trader, you could use this opportunity to add value to yourself. Ellis stared at Northern with slightly widened eyes. What in the world is this? What the hell? I never. He never thought Northern was so thoughtful. Chapter 188. Full of surprises. For the next couple of minutes, both of them continued in silence. Since it was a straight journey to this point, there was not much to navigate about the road. And the monsters that would have served as a threat had either been exonerated by Northern or Dark Terror, or had seen the necessity for serious migration. So, it wasn't strange that there were no monsters when they were going, and even now that they were coming back. By this time, the warmth of the daylight star was getting cooler as compared to its state when they were walking here. Ellis had even sweat then, but now he was very fine. He seems like he lacked stamina. It wasn't like he himself boasted of an amazing level of stamina, but it was beyond average. Average wouldn't have been able to hold on all night against a massive horde of monsters, although that fact was also owed to several reasons. But the entire point was he did hold on. And that was owed to his time spent in the rift. Those treks, that strenuous mining, they might have been suffering, but they achieved something in his body. Ellis, however, was like a wimpy kid, and strangely, he was beginning to get worried. Northern shook his head. Come off it. Carrying myself is a lot of hassle already. I mean, look at how lacking I am. Worried about another person? TCH. Get a grip on yourself. So. Interrupted by Ellis's timid tone, Northern glanced to his side as they both walked forward. So, where are you going? Sir, I don't know the details, but it's supposed to be some sort of expedition with Raven. Ellis's eyes lit up with golden sparkling lights. He quickly got in Northern's front and stopped him, exclaiming, You're going out with Lady Raven? Can you take me along? No, you should take me along. A slight frown crept upon Northern's brow. What is this? Are you okay? Ellis, however, did not even care what Northern was saying at the moment. His eyes went out of focus as he thought aloud. Wait, if I can fit into that your spacious bag, it should be possible, right? His eyes came back to Northern. Or you could tell her that you want to go with me. He held Northern, whose eyes slowly drifted down to the point of contact between the two of them. Ellis didn't need to be told before he slowly removed his hand. I'm sorry, very sorry. He helped Northern dust his shoulder where he had held him. You know, I'm just saying, Lady Raven is a very amazing person. Northern hissed and walked past him. Amazing my foot. That manipulative black fox. Come on, wait up. Ellis quickly ran after him, begging. Seriously, can't you do this one favor for me? I'd be indebted to you for life. Northern paused and turned his gaze to him. You have not yet earned the right to ask for another favor from me. So far, so good. Favor has carried you to this point. Ellis' expression slowly fell. Once again, he was made to remember how pathetic his state was before meeting Northern. While he didn't feel good hearing that he didn't earn his current place with, from his point of view, such an amazing, strange and strong person as Northern, It was the truth he needed to hear at this moment. Because upon everything, Northern was still trying to look out for him. Even though it was an agenda to make Ellis finally be of better use to him. But in the end, was it not to Ellis' own benefit?
I'm sorry.
Ellis said in a somber tone. A tone that suddenly left a bitter taste in Northern's mouth. It's good that you know. Even though he felt bad, he didn't care. This was Ellis's reality. Sugarcoating anything wasn't going to help the poor guy. I'm obviously never going to say pleasing things because I feel bad saying the hurtful truth. I don't care about the crap going on inside him. If he keeps going like this, he's just going to die. Northern turned to his front and continued walking. The silence continued with them until they got back to the estate. Even in the forest that surrounded the mansion, there were no monsters. Well, Northern had dealt with those ones earlier on. There was probably only one remaining monster in this estate. Northern's neighbor. Northern stopped in front of the entrance to the mansion. Ellis, observing the strange difference in his composure, asked, "Is something wrong?" Northern suddenly seemed more calm than usual. His expression was stern, and his eyes were slowly glowing. The glowing eyes were not common but were also not a strange thing. It could be found on rare occasions in powerful drifters, since it is highly believed that the eyes are a core organ that connects one's soul to the environment. It's possible for a drifter's eyes to glow. It just proved how skilled they are at handling their soul essence. Of course, he never thought the cause for Northern's own glow could be a practically impossible and unheard reason. Powers that were tied to the history of one's bloodline were incredibly rare. Impossibly rare, in fact. Ellis! Northern's hoarse voice came out so cold that it made chills walk eerily on Ellis' skin. Yes? He responded, skeptically. Today, I will show you something. A fraction of my strength. Ellis gulped. Northern looked at him. He still had that stern look, but a small smile graced his lips beautifully. It is not to make you fear me or anything. I just want to tell you to never be comfortable with being weak and useless. Ouch! While that did sting, Ellis paid unwavering attention to the things he was hearing. Northern stretched his hand up, stretching his body to the left and to the right. Crap! After fighting the entire night, my body feels a bit sore. Ellis scrunched up his eyes and looked inside. Then he sharply swung his eyes to Northern. Wait, don't tell me. Northern cocked his head to the side, his brows knitting in confusion. Tell you what? You finally want to fight that thing? Ellis pointed towards the monster in the mansion. Northern scoffed. Finally, Ellis narrowed his eyes, trapped in a few beats of silence before his voice managed to break free. Wait, you've faced it before? Northern nodded. Yes. And you couldn't defeat it and had to run away? Northern narrowed his brows in disgust. No way. Ellis tilted his head back a little and squinted his eyes at Northern, trying to make sense of the things he was saying. But he only got more confused. Eventually, he had to ask, I don't understand. If you fought it before, and you didn't lose and run away, did you give up mid-fight? Northern shook his head. No. A wicked grin slowly formed on his lips. It surrendered, so I spared it. Ellis felt his heart drop. Chapter 189. The Art and Act of Copy Part 1. Ellis stood in utter silence for a couple of seconds. His hand was on his chest, which was heavily rising up and going down. It had been over 3 minutes since Northern had said what he said, and yet Ellis still couldn't make sense of it. He spared a monster? Just when he thought Northern was out of surprises, this happens. I thought I had mastered the act of not getting surprised anymore. He really had. But this was a different situation. If truly Northern was strong enough to spare a monster. No, for a monster to surrender to him, then this changes all of Ellis's evaluations of Northern. Of course, he found Northern to be very interesting, strange, and strong in a lot of ways. All these ways, however, were coated in the shadows of mystery. So while Ellis saw a certain value in Northern, it was a bit tough to compare him to other people he'd seen, especially in terms of combat. Hence, it was quite understandable why he didn't think Northern would beat Braham until he saw it with his own eyes. Now he was about to see something more, and this would reinforce his mind and heart with the kind of man Northern is. He gulped and looked at Northern, who was folding and unfolding his fist. So, you intend to fight it again, right? Yes, Northern responded curtly. And you have before. Yes. But you let it go? Yes. Ellis's brows furrowed together. He was silent for a couple of beats before he exclaimed, "But why?" Northern halfway turned his head with a raised brow as Ellis's complaint of uncommon sense continued. "Why would you, a drifter, spare a monster?" Northern's brow lowered. The question had a straightforward answer, at least to him. Because it surrendered? There's no fun killing what has accepted to be killed. Ellis paused, horror frozen on his face with a slightly fallen mouth. No fun killing what has accepted to be killed. What is this, a game reserve? At this point, he couldn't understand anymore how this guy in front of him thought. What are monsters to him? Or what are humans to him? Ellis was very confused. Well, I want you to follow me there and watch me fight it. This lesson is for you to learn. Don't just gawk. Learn. In essence, you intend to show off to me? Northern cocked his head left and right, then responded, I don't know if we can call it a show-off, since I'll be fighting it in a completely disadvantaged state. Ellis stared at him more seriously, asking, What do you mean? It's simple. The last time we fought, I was kind of at my peak. I was with my best armor, best sword, and trying out really cool abilities. I guess all of that had come together to really intimidate the monster. If I confront it the same way, it will just surrender again. Yes, that way. Wouldn't it be easy to kill it? Northern chuckled and scoffed at Ellis's words. Easy? What has easy done for you so far? He tapped Ellis's flat chest and stepped forward. As Northern's legs delicately moved in front of each other, tracing a straight path to the entrance of the mansion, the white and brown leather armor that adorned his body, although slightly stained with black blood, slowly disintegrated into black sparks. By the time Northern took a step into the mansion, he was walking in shirtless, only a thin linen of pants on him. Ellis, belatedly realizing what Northern was onto, rushed forward shouting, Don't tell me you're intending to challenge it like that. Northern paused, a step into the mansion. Then he looked back with a corner of his lips raised. What do you think? Ellis's legs slowly stopped 2 meters before Northern. Why would you face it unarmed? At least wear something, he advised, his tone ringing with a heart-warming sincerity. I can easily defeat it with weapons. Where is the enjoyment and growth in easily being able to do something? I think I want to see how hard this can get. So you're going to hunt with no armor and weapon. Northern clenched his fist and faced front. Don't worry, I have more than enough. His eyes glowed with blue sparks as he walked inside the mansion. Because the daylight star was slowly retrieving all its glow and retreating into the embrace of the mighty clouds, the environment was slowly becoming dark. The slight darkness, however, made the inside of the mansion very dark. It was almost possible to touch the shadows that lurked around. Jarrrrrrrr. Just as Northern had suspected, the monster slowly began to growl. He didn't need the light to be able to perfectly see that it was slowly coming towards him. As it did, Northern looked at it, curling up a smile on his lips. This is my first time looking at the profile of a monster. I wonder how it will be. Just as he thought, a panel appeared before his eyes, signifying the information about the monstrosity that slowly trudged towards him, eerily growling. Monster profile. Name, Corpse Eater. True name, unattained. Soul rank, savage. Danger level, abysmal. Attribute, ravage hunger, kin of darkness. So it's an abysmal level and not apex. Phew. Northern paused and cleaned his eyes. Then he looked again. Crap. I didn't know monsters can have attributes too. Amazing. However, he didn't have much time to think about this new discovery. Almost blending with the darkness, the creature slowly crept out, hunched. 5 red orbs glared viciously from its maw. I'm still surprised as to how its eyes ended up being in its mouth. Maybe some sort of an evolution. Now that he thought about it, Night Terror 2 underwent something similar. The Terror always had only a pair of arms, however. After becoming a devil rank, it grew another pair. How troublesome. So monsters evolve their body with new danger levels. His information on this subject matter was incomplete, so it was still an immature idea. So far, just Night Terror and this monster had been his case studies. And those danger levels had been quite significant ones. It didn't mean that when a monster was evolving from hazard level to disaster level, a physical evolution would always happen. Or it could mean so. Northern didn't know. But now that he had the ability to see monsters whenever he wanted, he was bound to find out. So this wasn't something he needed to rush. There's a lot to be discovered. But first, let's focus on what's in front of us. Northern fixed his eyes on the hunched creature. It was a bipedal nonetheless, although it looked quadrupedal, but that was because of its hunched state. Each limb ended with crude black claws. Muscles rolled beneath its glossy black skin like vicious cords, tightening with every slight movement. Northern's eyes did not waver, not even for a moment. Instead, he licked his lips and slowly hunched his back. His arms dangled below, fists clenched. He was almost like another monster. It was strange and uncomfortable to look at, but someone with an incredible sight like Ellis could see at a glance. He perfectly copied the monster's stance. No flaws at all. Ellis was shocked. He was standing at the entrance, a step inside the mansion. And like Northern, he didn't need light to see through the darkness, which was why he could see this perfectly well. All of Northern's form, his body positioning, had in an instant flowed seamlessly and perfectly, reforming into the monster that was standing before him. From Ellis's vantage point, it was just as if two corpse eaters were facing each other. It was strange, uncomfortable. In fact, he didn't know what to feel, but Ellis knew how impressive this feat was. It was just like that time. Does he have a copy ability? No, that does not make any sense. How then is that monster he commands explained? He commands two monsters, so I guess he has a taming ability. But this can't be just. Ellis felt like his head was going to explode from all the streams of thoughts. I probably should just focus on this moment like he had said. He decided internally. Although it took extra effort to not think about what Northern's talent could be. He tried his best to shove it behind his mind and carefully watched the battle that was about to unfurl before him. The corpse eater that was growling a couple of seconds ago paused and became silent immediately when Northern took its form. Its eyes were beginning to burn more viciously. Northern didn't know why, nor did he care. "Come at me," he declared with a maddening grin. And at the sound of his voice, the corpse eater launched itself at Northern with blinding speed, claws extended and maw gaping open, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Chapter 190. The Art and Act of Copy Part 2. The corpse eater launched itself at Northern, leading with its right clawed hand in a vicious swipe. Northern's eyes narrowed as he studied the monster's form and movement. Then, in one fluid motion, he mirrored the eater's attack with his own right hand extended into a powerful folded fist instead of claws. Their makeshift claws met with a clash, the force of the impacts causing tremors. The eater recoiled, surprise flashing in its burning red eyes. It paused for a moment, its stance wary and evaluating. Northern grinned savagely, not breaking form. "You'll have to be better than that." Although he said that, crimson blood was slipping through his fingers. In the end, the fact that he didn't have a claw really bit back at him. With a roar of anger, the eater reared back and attempted to bring both clawed hands down onto Northern's head. But he was already moving, twisting his body with unnatural dexterity to avoid the blow, his movements perfectly synchronizing with the eater's. As the monster's hands slammed into the floor, cracking it, Northern brought his own hands up in a copied strike aimed at its exposed flanks. His fist fell upon the eater's body. Instead of raking blood with a slash, it was like a powerful sledgehammer had fallen on its form. The eater howled in pain and fury, rearing back. Northern flowed back into a ready stance, his grin widening as more azure sparks danced in his eyes madly. Ellis watched in awe and horror. This is splendid. He is matching the monster's every move. And that thing's is undoubtedly a abysmal danger level. His hands were tapping his jaw. For one, he had no idea how Northern could pull this off. There was no other explanation, even though he didn't want to think about. That seemed to be the answer in this case. That must be his talent. But what then explains dark terror? But then he really needed to consider things unconventional. Or does he have two talents? Ellis immediately shook his head and gave a silent, absurd laughter. That would mean he has two soul cores. That is practically impossible. It has never happened, never have been recorded, and Ellis didn't think it will ever happen. Whatever would cause a human to have more than one soul core, one might as well refer to them as monsters. Because only monsters have more than one soul core. The fight was going on nonetheless, Northern increasingly taking on the feral, bestial mannerisms of the monster itself. It was as if he didn't just mimic the eater's moves, but embodied its very essence. His movements were fluid yet untamed as they traded blows. He mirrored the monster's attacks with eerie synchronicity, folded fists and low kicks meeting raking claws and snapping jaws. Blow for brutal blow. They danced their violent exchange across the torn floor, azure sparks flickering to life with each bone-jarring impact between man and monster. Ellis could scarcely comprehend the scene unfolding before him. Northern wasn't just matching the abysmal danger corpse eater's strikes. It was like he was predicting them. His eyes were frighteningly glued to the monster with the strange light, and he was moving with such preternatural grace that it defied rational explanation. How could a mere human, talent or no, perceive and respond with such promptness to an opponent of that caliber? It transcended the boundaries of skill and reflex. It was as if Northern had conceptually become the corpse eater itself. The realization sent a chill down Ellis's spine even as he gaped in awe at the breathtaking spectacle. Northern flowed through each defensive weave and retaliatory strike like coursing water, never resisting the eater's brute force but guiding it along harmless trajectories. His assault was no less merciless. At times, he would go rigid as Scorpion's tail, pale corded muscle and tendon quivering taut as a high-tension wire poised to unleash devastation. In the next blink, he'd explode into a whirling cyclone of elbows and knees, battering the eater's armored flanks with thunderous impacts that sprayed gore in widening arcs. The beast met each onslaught with feral intensity, undeterred even as crude welts blossomed across its mottled hide. Its claws slashed in blinding flurries, only to be turned aside by Northern's defensive weaves or bone-breaking counters. They were locked in a seemingly eternal stalemate, one that saw both combatants give as brutally as they received. Northern was utterly without fear, closing to grappling range again and again in stark defiance of the eater's terrifying might. At one point, the creature seized him by the throat, those hideous jaws gaping wide to devour him whole. Most would have instantly accepted their fate in the face of such annihilation. Not Northern. With horrific calm, he slammed his thumbs into the eater's maw, pulping the orbs in a viscous spray. It released him with a keening wail, staggering back as its ruined eyes wept geysers of steaming ichor. Northern didn't let up. He stormed in while it reeled, unleashing a convulsion of crippling strikes from elbows, knees, and booted heels. Bones audibly snapped and grated with each thunderous impact that cratered the eater's once formidable musculature. The barrage culminated with a leaping knee that demolished its lower jaw, shattering the bone into splinters embedded in the shredded ruin of its throat. It collapsed in a gurgling heap, thrashing weakly as its lifeblood poured out in pulsing jets. Northern pinned one of its remaining limbs underfoot with disturbing tranquility, reaching down to grip the ragged remnants of its face in an iron grip. Ellis cringed, half expecting the man to simply crush its skull against the floor. Certainly, none would have faulted him for such merciful savagery after the beast's vile attempt to consume him. Yet Northern did something far more disturbing. Cradling its shattered head gently, he leaned in until they were almost nose to ragged nasal cavity. His lips parted in a psychotic grin, baring teeth slick with its blood and spittle. "I can taste your despair," he growled, voice guttural and hauntingly feral. It's absolutely exquisite. The eater shuddered, a pathetic whine rattling from the ruin of its throat. Northern's laugh was a hair-raising cackle of pure, gleeful malice. So much hunger! He inhaled deeply through flared nostrils, savoring the reek of charred flesh and voided bowels. I can smell it all over you, the ravenous, gnawing emptiness that fuels your existence. Dropping all pretense of mercy, he wrenched the eater's head sideways with an obscene crunch of vertebrae. He shuddered once, weakly, and fell horribly still. Northern rose fluidly, ripper claws scoring deep furrows across his back and shoulders from the eater's death throes. Black ichor matted his hair and ran in thick rivulets down his chest, but he paid it no mind. His gaze was distant, alight with something far beyond mere battlemania. Raising his hand, Northern smeared the congealing filth across his lips, tongue darting out to taste the foul corruption. His eyes rolled back in his skull and his breath escaped in a throaty moan of pure, debauched ecstasy. Ellis looked on in abject revulsion, all thoughts of talents and souls driven from his mind. Whatever Northern had become in that moment, it was far beyond human or sane. Ellis had witnessed true, unadulterated madness, and in the back of his shattered psyche, a tiny voice asked if there were any differences between Northern and the eater he'd just so savagely broken. Chapter 191. The Art and Act of Copy Part 3. It was tough for Ellis to answer the question. He had undoubtedly thought that the battle between Northern and the abysmal-level corpse eater was going to be tough, in fact impossible. But what he had just witnessed violated his common sense. It was terrifying and at the same time amazing. Inasmuch as Northern had achieved his victory, it wasn't flawless and wasn't without a painful price. After all, his body was marred with crude scars that looked like they stung badly. But what worried Ellis the most was that, in this brief moment, Northern seemed different, so different that he was scared of approaching him. He wasn't even sure if he indeed got the message that Northern was trying to pass to him. Because really, all that went on in his head was how futile it would be to chase after this person. Beating a monster with no weapon, or rather, with its own style. Predicting the moves of humans was one thing, but predicting that of a monster, it was supposed to be impossible. Inasmuch as monsters could be defined as simple-minded existences, there were some that were distinct from the rest, referred to as variants, and this was obviously because of their high danger level. Night Terror was one of them, and this corpse eater too. They possessed almost unrivaled intelligence and could make seemingly humane decisions, which made fighting them more difficult than usual. Predicting them was like predicting a human opponent. While it could be possible, Ellis had no doubt that it required a frightening level of focus. To be able to pull it off in an instant, and keep it consistent throughout the battle, was nothing short of incredible. Ellis felt his respect for Northern dig its roots deeper into his heart. His eyes gleamed with awe. He's amazing. Meanwhile, Northern stood afar, staring blankly. His head felt light, too light. What is wrong with me? There was something strange burning inside of him. It was almost like a hunger, something threatening to cause a rampage inside of him. It felt hot and uncomfortable, felt insane. And he really disliked insane. I feel driven by a ferocious urge to devour. Northern thought clearly about it before it made sense to him. The particular attribute he had seen on the corpse eater, and one thing that all other corpse eaters had in common. That ravage hunger. Perhaps it was the explanation for how maniacal he felt. This was, after all, when he used the active ability of the formless attribute for so long. Apart from the strange feeling, it was sweet. It filled his belly with an unfamiliar sense of glee. Northern placed his hands on his torso, trying to hide the curve that sat across them, enjoying the memories of how fantastic he had been just moments ago, and the sweetness of it. He was in so much reveling that he didn't see. Standing up, Ellis, on the other hand, was pointing with a pale face, sweating buckets. Northern? Northern. I think it's getting up again. His voice rang out but was soft, strangled by the fear that throbbed at the edge of his throat. Come on, Northern! At once, he let out a raging cry, breaking through both his annoying fear and the distracted Northern. Northern immediately shifted his gaze to Ellis. However, his eyes widened in that moment, and like a stream of water, he flowed away barely a second before the monster's large arms powerfully landed on the floor and sent splinters of debris across all directions. Northern softly landed, with no shoes on, an ear-to-ear grin adorning his lips. "Oh, sweet, sweet indeed, you didn't die." His eyes glowed with vicious happiness. Was that even happiness? Perhaps madness, to be more precise. Northern, however, didn't seem to care how he looked. Right now, only one thought ran amok in his mind. I want to see the full extent of the art and act of copy. I want to use Formless to its fullest potential. His grin was almost tearing his face apart, making him look maniacal, absurd, and most of all, fearsome. Ellis shuddered from the cold tendrils that crawled on his skin. He could feel the collar of his clothes wet from sweat, all in just a couple of seconds. He didn't know which to fear more, Northern or the Corpse Eater. While the Corpse Eater was still marred with scars from the moments ago battle, it stood with a menacing and vicious presence. It looked incredibly angry. 2 of its red orbs were gone, leaving just 2 left. Its jagged teeth were gritting boorishly, creating a subtle screeching sound. Deep within those closed teeth, Ellis could see glimpses of the red glow. They had grown brighter and were flowing with a bloodthirsty radiance. Just standing in the same space with the savage monster made Ellis' heart squirm. It was a cataclysm of malevolence indeed. Northern, on the other hand, Ellis wasn't quite sure. His eyes were burning with an otherworldly glee. There was a delight that made no sense. It made him look almost deranged. Faced with such a creature, it was as if Northern was incredibly happy. Ellis just couldn't find any words. He really is mad. While the monster was truly intimidating, watching Northern made his entire soul cave in with fear. Northern and the Corpse Eater locked gazes tightly before the monster shot at him with blinding velocity. His eyes widened for a moment, the glee circumstantially disappearing from his face. Before Northern could even flinch, the talon of the monster raked across his skin, scoring deep gashes on his pale body as he staggered back in an attempt to dodge. Crap! His legs faltered back, and he let out a grunt of surprise and pain, clutching at the ragged gashes that instantly welled with a crimson flow that trickled down his fingers like a conscious red silk. The eater wasn't done. It twisted with agonizing effort, swinging its strong tail in a horizontal arc aimed at snapping Northern's legs out from under him. Only his almost feral reflexes saved him. He launched into a backwards handspring just as the appendage scythed through the space his shins had occupied. Even so, he couldn't fully evade. The tip clipped his bare foot, sending shockwaves of numbing force up his leg. Northern crashed to the ground in an ungainly sprawl, but he was already moving. The eater loomed over him, towering against the backdrop of the inky shadows that crawled inside the mansion like a descent of destruction. Its jaws distended in a warped grin of triumph, black ichor raining down in viscous ropes from the tattered ruin of its throat. Chapter 192, What a Battle Should Be. Surely, at this point, Northern didn't need to be told what his fault was. He had realized it in that instant when the monster appeared in front of him before he could react. No doubt, because of his winning state, he got over himself. Not only was he distracted, but in that momentary lapse, he had underestimated his opponent. And so when the Corpse Eater suddenly lunged with an increased speed, he was caught off guard. These were his consequences of getting complacent. Again. Over and over again. I keep repeating the same crappy mistake. Northern ground his teeth painfully. One hand was still holding his side, where blood seeped from. The Corpse Eater menacingly towered before him, glaring down, obviously with a ghoulish glee, even though its facial features betrayed no emotion of any sort. Northern was now at the mercy of the monster. Of course, it wasn't like he was going to die. He still had options in his arsenal to use, but it pained him to resort to such antics, since he wanted to win this with raw power. The Corpse Eater growled. Low but a palpable viciousness seeped from the growl. Even Northern could tell. I guess you're carrying a lot of grudge, huh? All those moments where it was completely powerless before him. Damn. He even made it clean the entire mansion. The monster probably was boiling, about to burst with so much hatred for this wickedness in human clothing kneeling before it. With a thunderous roar of hatred and hunger, it reared back, preparing to bring the full brunt of its remaining bulk down upon Northern's prone form. There would be no surviving such an onslaught, only a rent, mangled aftermath amidst the fresh crimson smears of his gory obliteration. And yet, even staring at such annihilation in the face, a manic grin split Northern's features. Ah, crap. I don't know what is wrong with me. This is just so awesome. The morbid grin on Northern's face caused the Eater to shudder visibly. Even Ellis, whose legs had moved on their own in that moment, stopped in his tracks, blinking. Northern's sudden change in composure shrouded the entire place with an unfamiliar sense of dread. Both the Eater and Ellis couldn't tell, but both of them had leaped a couple of steps back before they could realize that they had. Pearls of sweat streamed down Ellis's face. The monster was probably sweating too, in its own way. Northern, however, was just staring, a wide grin parting his lips, his eyes glowing ghastly, altogether forming a concupiscent look on his face. The moment passed in silence, and Northern slowly began to rise. However, before he could completely rise, the monster lunged at him with a loud guttural cry. One could almost tell it was breaking the chains of fear that bound it just now. Faced with the same blinding speed again, Northern this time did not make the same mistake. There was no time to look, so the moment the monster moved, he rolled, allowing the Eater to crash into the floor where he'd been sprawled, delving dense into it. As it struggled to regain its bearings, he flowed to his feet in one sinuous, boneless movement. There was no wasted motion, no extraneous effort. One moment he was prone. The next he was upright with his fingers hooked into jagged furrows torn in the Eater's flank by his earlier barrage. Fetid ropes of intestine slithered free as he drove his grip deeper, nearly burying his forearms inside the creature's body cavity. Ellis blinked a couple of times. He didn't even see what just happened. When did he move? It was amazing that Northern could move like that. Did he teleport? Teleportation was far-fetched. Even he knew it was only available to some kind of drifters, the kind that were often called mages and scholars. And Northern wasn't that kind. Northern was clearly a warrior. But what other phenomenon would explain such blinding, unseen movement? I don't even know what to think anymore. At the very least, he was beginning to get one message. Northern is strong. I don't understand. If he had so much strength, then why did he let us get caught? Why is he so reserved and calm? Although crazy too. But Ellis just didn't expect that someone with so much combat prowess would be unknown. If anything, Northern was strong enough to be a party leader too. He was sure about it. Damn, he's strong. He's so strong. Ellis didn't seem to be able to get over how strong Northern is or could be. The corpse eater let out a deep, wild cry of agony, shaking the very air within the mansion. If not mistaken, the entire mansion itself. It tried to whirl away, but Northern held fast, using its own inertia to rip his arms laterally in opposite directions. With a sickening reverberation of sundered sinew and cracking bone, he laid the beast's body core open from pelvis to sternum. A tidal deluge of black gore and offal came exploding outwards, drenching them both in a warm, noxious rain. Northern kept his face angled into the blast, draping his tongue to catch the spurting essence of the Eater's life force. The coppery tang of it basting his palate made him shiver in rapturous ecstasy. Awesome indeed. Still impaled on his gory lances, the Eater could only gargle weakly around the eruption of its own viscera. It had nothing left, no defiance or final reserves of strength with which to punish Northern's audacity. Slowly, with equal measures of inevitability and mercy, he lowered it to the ground. Lank strands of flesh and gristle unspooled from Northern's forearms as the weight settled. What little remained of its eyes found him, glazed in the timeless resignation of the utterly defeated. "Look at me," Northern growled in that same eerie rasp as before. His voice was velvet-wrapped gravel, harsh yet mesmerizing. "Let your fear and despair fill me. Shoot them all at me." He punctuated those last words with a sharp inhalation and watched as the dimmed glow in the eater's maw slowly faded. Just then, two blackish orbs rolled out of its severed abdomen, and simultaneously, Northern heard the system. "You have slain an abysmal savage corpse eater. You have gained +6 talent fragments." 6? I expected it to be more, though. He received twice from killing Dark Terror, who had just become a devil at the time. Which means monsters were still, in the end, greatly limited by their soul rank. Northern raised his head and let out an audible breath. Meanwhile, Ellis watched all this in a state of frozen horror, muscles locked, breath stilled in his lungs. Even from where he observed, there was no mistaking the unholy intimacy of Northern's actions. It transcended simple violence or bloodlust. This was something deeply perverted and soulless, an elemental violation of all that was natural and wholesome. Finally, Northern came back to his senses and turned his head to Ellis, who shuddered weakly. "This," he said hoarsely, grinning at the shivering black-haired boy standing 6 meters away from him. "This is what a battle should be. Clap, clap, clap." He suddenly frowned as he heard the clapping sound. It definitely wasn't Ellis, since his eyes were currently on Ellis, and he wasn't clapping. He was barely even moving. Who could it be? It was all in a microsecond, but Northern's mind had already borne thousands of thoughts and ways to kill whoever had just witnessed a portion of what he is capable of. "Show yourself," he demanded, and slowly, a silhouette came out of the darkness. Chapter 193. Subject of Elimination. Step, 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 another step. With each step, the tension within Northern's chest grew thick. His hands were slowly opened, ready to hold out either the mortal blade or soul taker. Either of the two were deadly weapons capable of striking down their enemies with little to no effort. Since it was most likely a human, mortal blade was a more suited choice. That thing was obviously created to kill humans. There's no mistaking it. To think, "I'll finally have to kill someone," it wasn't a nice thought. In fact, in just a couple of seconds that the thought crossed his mind, Northern's taste buds were already bitter and disgusted. But what had to be done had to be done. The steps finally stopped, and slowly, the silhouette appeared out of the darkness, with both hands folded upon their chest. When Northern saw who it was, his eyes widened for a second, then creased back later. He sighed and dropped his hand, however. He questioned with tightly furrowed brows. "Seriously, Instructor Anne? What the hell are you doing here?" One of Annette's brows drifted up. "You know, I'm not too conversant with languages, but I can tell that thing that came out of your mouth is vulgar. You should apply respect when talking to me. Aside from being your instructor, I'm probably about 10 years older than you." "Yeah. So what?" Northern returned with a nonchalant tone. Annette, although she wanted to go closer and beat him up, she restrained herself and just covered her face with her hands. Even with what she had just seen, beating him up was nothing more than asking for trouble. She let out a deep exhale and then opened her mouth, showing some hesitation before her words came out. I always knew you had it in you, but not to this extent. You defeated an Apex-level monster without a weapon." Annette's voice was low, almost hoarse. In fact, that way, she was suppressing the turmoil that ran amok within her. Left to her, she would scream at the tip of her tongue because what she had just experienced was insane. None of the party leaders could pull it off. And one thing she was sure about was that Northern didn't even use the cloning ability. She figured that if he did, the battle would have gone more smoothly. But he didn't. He fought without armor, without a weapon too. It was crazy. It was insane. It made absolutely no sense. She stood there, like it was no big deal, but she was doing a great ton of work to suppress the bewilderment piling within her. She stared at Northern for a couple of minutes. His eyes on her were full of alertness and scorn. "Okay, look, this wasn't intentional. After what happened with Gilbert, I was worried about you, so I came around. Then I discovered there was a monster in here. At first, I thought it was the same monster that we've been having issues with. I was suspicious of you because what would the monster be doing at your place? So I decided to hide myself and just observe. She paused, looking at the immoral corpse of the monster. Then she spoke, tasting a tang of bitterness. I wasn't expecting this. Now that it had come to this, Northern was greatly conflicted about what to do. Should I just kill? It was a wild idea, but it wasn't impossible. If I take on the Soul of Khal, my abilities should be boosted. Then with Dark Terror and some other clones, it should be possible. Or I could just use my Chaos skill. He stared at her intensively. He was seriously considering it. I'm sorry. You are looking at me so intensely. I feel like I'm trapped in between dying and not dying by your hands. Northern continued to stare, blankly. But it'd be impossible for you to kill me. He raised his head a little bit. How sure are you? Annette chuckled. Well, not because of my ability or anything. But you are not so stupid as to kill the only person that could be on your side in this desolation. Exactly, that means you could be the only person in the meaning of the word, capable of betraying me. If I kill you right now, the possibility of that is taken away. Annette froze for a moment. Her face was a little pale. Calm, holy Tatch. I was joking. But you were actually thinking of killing me? Northern shrugged. I was considering it. You love to hide your abilities that badly? Northern stared distantly, then shrugged. I'm not particularly hiding them. I'm just not showing them. Should the need arise to do so, I will. I'm only being this careful because I believe I don't know much about the party leaders. I don't want them knowing anything about me when I don't know anything about them. Annette nodded. She lingered before saying, I see. Then an awkward silence hung in the dark air between the two before she cut through with her strong voice. Well, I have ample time. Thanks to the monster killing other monsters around. Things are beginning to crumble around here. If you want, I can tell you everything about the party leaders you want to know and also other things. Northern bent down and picked the soul cores but said as he did, Crumble? What is crumbling? Annette folded her arms again, looking down at him as he reached for the last black orb that was a bit far from the rest. What else? The structure of fear that Gilbert built. Oh, that? What's wrong? Since the monsters are dying, the people are beginning to feel like they can go out on their own to source for meat. Since the party leaders are refusing to go out, the only thing stopping them is the actual monster itself. Since no one knows what it is, everyone is skeptical about going. That is true. Even though all monsters are dead and the people feel like they can fend for themselves now, Dark Terror has become the next object of fear, and it's very much possible for them to build another structure around that. Northern caressed the orb in his hand, lost in his thoughts. But that'll also be risky for them, because this time it's not a fear that they can control. Gilbert wouldn't want to build a structure around such fear, since it affects both them and the people. Eliminating it is a better choice. He looked at Annette. Is it that they are scared? Can't the party leaders all come out to fight this monster? Annette shrugged. Gilbert is a lot of things. I don't understand the way he thinks sometimes, but yes, the party leaders are already coming together to challenge it. The strange thing, however, is that Raven dropped out. She did. Annette continued. She didn't just drop out. She disbanded her party and is no more a party leader. Northern's mouth fell open. Eh? Why? Chapter 194. About Party Leaders, Part 1. All three of them were standing on the ground floor, the lifeless and ruthlessly slain body of the corpse eater still marring the ground. A couple of seconds of silence flew by with the night wind after Northern asked why. Ellis also showed intense interest in the next thing Annette was going to say. However, she just shrugged with both her hands. Who knows? No one knows what that girl is thinking about. I personally think she's a disaster on two legs. Northern paused, seriously thinking about it for a moment. Could the reason be related to the fact that we have to set out soon? But she didn't need to disband her party, did she? Even he could not come to a sensible conclusion to explain Raven's action. Well, I don't care. he declared and trudged towards the stairs. Annette and Ellis naturally followed him, albeit silently. Both of them were probably still lost in the thought of what they had witnessed just now. It was hard, incredibly hard for their minds to recover from the awe of it. And the sad part was, they've not even begun to see what Northern was so much capable of. This was just Northern just trying to maximize the formless attribute and know how to activate it willingly. His mind has been searching for every possible answer to a certain question about this particular attribute after all. They finally reached Northern's abode. Immediately, the door opened. Mr. Fluffy jumped up, stretched its leg forward and snarled audibly. It was almost as if it was greeting Northern, but that wasn't the case. "Have you seriously been sleeping all the while?" The beast made a low growl and caressed Northern's leg with its white furs. "Ah, whatever. Better don't get awfully comfortable." Northern placed the 3 orbs on his bed, pulled the chair out from the table and faced Annette. "You can sit here." Annette nodded with a downturned mouth. So you were hospitable? That's unexpected and a good quality." Northern's brows rose a little. "A good quality for what?" "Don't worry about that." She gestured a dismissal with her hand. "Don't we have something else to discuss besides that?" Northern sat on the bed and crossed his legs, then spoke. "Yeah, you said you were going to tell me what I needed to know about the party leaders. What is your price?" Annette's brows slowly furrowed. "What do you mean price?" "Price is price now. There's no way you were going to give me that information for free." Annette was silent for a few seconds, staring into Northern's soul with her vermilion eyes. Then she opened her mouth, with a slight hesitation though. "Actually, I was going to do exactly just that. But you see, Northern, I think you need serious help. Now that you mention it, I think I will have a price. And my price will be that." Her eyes drifted to the soul cores that were laying sparsely behind Northern. Northern followed her eyes with his, turning his head back a little bit. Then he shot back at her. "No way. No. I am not going to give you that. Wait, why don't you just do it for free if you wanted to do it that way before? Shouldn't you be wanting to prove a point to me?" "What point?" Annette grinned at him. The grin was like that of an aged vixen. It was very uncomfortable. "I mean, that you don't have to take prices for everything." Her mouth went round. "Oh, you do know that." She then shook her head subtly. No, there's no use trying to prove any point to you. You are a faulty human. A couple of screws are loose. There's no use proving anything." Northern's mouth slightly fell. "Isn't that too harsh?" Annette tilted her head. "Is it? Either way, I can't give them to you. Instead of these, I'll give you 5 soul cores. But not these." He folded his hands and looked away with his eyes closed, waiting for her response. "Well, I wasn't looking to gain anything from this, but thanks to your insecurities, I did. So maybe 5 is good. Or you could make it 10. I'll reduce it to 3. His glare was almost petrifying. Okay, 5 is okay. Don't bite me," Annette conceded, raising her hands slightly. "So, what do you want to know about the party leaders?" "Everything." "Oh, I see." Her lips slowly curled up. Silence ensued the moment she stopped talking. Ellis was standing by the doorside, leaning on the wall. Mr. Fluffy was sitting on the floor, paying attention like it could understand every human tongue they spoke. Northern was seated on the bed, while Annette was on the chair. Then her words came out, beautifully cutting through the decorum, words after words. "So, first of all, we have 13 party leaders. 13. She paused and looked at his face. It was unflinching. Then she continued, 99 students appeared in this land minus us. Well, obviously since we are not students." She allowed a soft giggle and carried on. "I know you know the narrative of how we got to this point, so I'm going to skip all that. 13 best students, both in talent and potential, were selected. How? Through combat? Don't tell me you guys were holding a duel for leadership when you were surrounded by monsters that could attack any time." Annette laughed a little. "It'd have been more fun if we did that. But the headmaster was the one that selected. Although there were several private meetings between him and Raven. I have no idea why though." Northern looked down for a moment, then raised his head, nodding, I see. Well, the first party leader is Raven. Her full name is Raven Light Kageyama, and she's... Annette had no choice in that moment but to pause because the moment she mentioned that name, Northern's expression changed. His eyes widened and pupils thinned in. For a moment, he looked paler than usual. Eventually, he raised his head and asked again. I'm sorry, what did you call it again? Her clan name? Kageyama? Raven Light Kageyama. Okay, what the crap now? Chapter 195. About Party Leaders, Part 2. Raven Light Kageyama. Raven Light Kageyama. Raven Light Kageyama. The words continued to ring inside Northern's mind, bugging him heavily, causing him to rife with so much worry. Raven is from the Kageyama clan? The same clan as Shin. Although his father changed their clan name and rarely mentioned his original clan, he didn't particularly hide it from Northern. First of all, the clan flag and sigil were folded somewhere in a box, and Northern had managed to stumble upon it once. Other times, Shin had senselessly bragged using the name of his clan. The Great Kageyama Clan, he would say. Another thing was, during practice, he used strange footwork that was sharp and ruthless in execution, but he never taught them to Northern. He also never used them on hunts, even when his life depended on it. Northern remembered asking him several times why that was the case. Why bother training a battle style you never get to use? But Shin's response was, a day will come where I will have to confront my destiny. Since I have a family now, you and Aisha, I can't keep running away, can I? His words always sounded burdened with so much weight that Northern hated asking the question. Also, it was quite weird how his answers were always consistent, and he never complained that Northern was bugging him with those questions. Of course, Northern didn't know what he meant. He just figured that Shin probably still had some family business, one that he had been running away from. His thoughts seemed to blur the more he thought about it. Raven and Shin are from the same clan? As awe-striking as this revelation was, and as much as he wanted to know more about it, he had to control and bury the urge. There were more important matters to tend to, after all. Are you fine? Annette asked just as he brought his focus back to his surroundings. Nodding his head, he gave a curt response. Yes. All right then, like I was saying, Raven is the first party leader, and I think she's the strongest person in this stronghold. I'm not surprised. The second party leader, of course, is me. She pointed to herself with a smug grin. Is Raven stronger than you? Annette's smug grin disappeared instantly as she scratched her hair thoroughly. You do know how to ruin a mood, don't you? I think Lady Raven is stronger than everyone in the stronghold, except Sage Gilbert of... Ellis froze before he could complete his statement. Two scornful gazes were shooting lasers at him, making him wish he hadn't spoken. Northern and Annette hissed simultaneously and took their eyes off him, facing each other. I can't say for sure since we both have not fought, but I can't also say that I am capable of defeating her. Annette exclaimed her next few words with an almost frustrated tone. That girl is a monster. I don't understand how someone so young is so rigid and scary. But then, when I remember she is from the Kageyama clan, it makes some sense. Northern reared his head back slightly. Why? Are the Kageyama clan famous for making monsters or something? That might not be far-fetched, considering Shin. I know he's very strong but hides it a lot of times. In fact, Northern suspected that Shin probably asked him to run away that day he awakened because he didn't want him to witness the true Kageyama battle style. And although Northern was at that moment very worried, he really wanted to see for himself how Shin was going to defeat the monster. He wasn't sure if he got to see anything or not. There was no way to tell since he wasn't particularly vast and knowledgeable with battle arts and styles, as at then. Nothing even now. But there was a slight difference between then and now. Anyways, after me, I can point to Au and Mew. Au is the party leader for Party 3, and Mew is her assistant. Northern didn't know their names, but he could guess from how alike they sounded. The twins. Yes, the twins. Annette stroked her jaw slightly. And I would say both of them are the third strongest. If I'm to separate them, they are weaker individually. And you never almost see them apart. All of you guys are the first set of drifters I met at the Citadel. Annette smiled ruefully. I remember. Who would have thought this is what would befall us? Northern narrowed his eyes a bit and raised them to Annette. I never got to ask. How did you people end up here? Annette was silent for a few seconds, but it didn't look like she was hesitating. Neither did she look like something was wrong. If she did, Northern would have picked it up instantly because he was very suspicious of everyone from the Citadel and thought Annette and the twins were also in on it too. Although he was still skeptical and wasn't sure if he was right. But he knew for sure that he was right about Gilbert's involvement in whatever had happened to them and brought them here. Me saying that right now will cost you those 3 cores. You could wait for another time, but right now we should focus on what you paid me for. Smart of you to do that. I'm just meeting your expectations, that's all. Her lips curled up like that of a fox. Northern ground his teeth internally. He wanted to know so badly, but at the very least, he could tell that Annette didn't look like she was hiding something. But he also didn't intend to trust that notion. Not his instincts, not what she portrayed. He didn't trust any of them. Annette's voice resounded in the room, pulling him out of his thoughts. Well, for the 4th strongest, I'd say Ryan Johnson. That kid is a prodigy, and his talent is ice manipulation. It's insane. He is so strong now already, and he isn't even a master. Northern's brain clicked in that moment. That must be it. The guy whose talent cost 5,000 talent fragments. Interesting. Yes, then I think Arlam Phoebe should be ranked the 5th. He is incredibly strong with an impenetrable wall of defense. Then I think Braham is ranked the 6th. Well, you've met Braham already. Northern downturned his lips in utter disgust and glanced at Ellis. Then he commented. That nut job. Sure, whatever you think, but that guy is the only healer we have in this stronghold. Braham's healing ability is so significant that he can even heal an amputated hand. Northern's mouth fell open. You've got to be kidding me. No, I'm not. This is why Braham is the most precious and pampered party leader in this stronghold. No matter what you do, nothing can happen to him. Northern's eyes went out of focus. I understand when you put it like that. Healing talent abilities are very rare. And having that in this desolation places him on a pedestal far higher than just anyone. No wonder he is so cocky. Well, that is that. The 7th rank is Atticus Pemberton, a prodigy too, but his arrogance gets in his way a lot of times. The 8th rank is Vita Beeson, the dark-skinned lady you met with me the other day. The 9th rank is Esmeralda Humphrey. The 10th is Bertram Standish. Chapter 196. Unfair Farewell, Part 1. What Annette managed to explain to him were just basic introductions. Her explanations didn't do much, but they provided him with a little insight and were far better than knowing nothing. At least now he knew that not only the students were members of the parties, but only the students were selected as leaders. Perhaps that was a biased play from Gilbert's part. She also mentioned some key events that happened. Their first meeting with the Sloria Nation stronghold, and Raven and Gilbert's fight. The latter part was what intrigued Northern the most. Unfortunately, the night was wearing thin, and Annette claimed she was feeling sleepy. Although he suspected that she did that to make him swell with suspense, and then she was probably going to charge him with more cores. Because throughout the night, he couldn't help but wonder, what in the world could have caused their fight? Thinking about it was as well crazy. Raven sure was a master, but fighting a sage? It was beyond insane. And here I was thinking I'm the most insane person in this desolation. Northern slowly propped himself up. It had been hours since everyone parted to sleep. Annette and Ellis were probably somewhere in one of the rooms of this mansion, sleeping peacefully since the dreadful neighbor was gone. And he, too, was supposed to be sleeping, but so much disturbed his heart. Perhaps it was just pure excitement of what was to come. After all, Raven promised to reach out to him today. The sky was still dark. 2 moons sat distant in the gray sky, one more distant than the other. They were almost like a pair of hollow, deranged eyes staring at him from above. He almost felt a sense of kinship from making out the deranged look in his own mind. Then he shook his head and turned away from the window, muttering, "I should try to get some sleep. It's too late though." Northern immediately flared up. In a swift motion, he launched his hand towards the direction that the voice had come from. What his hand met, however, was a feather. He didn't see it, but something certainly fluttered off the moment he shot his hand forward. What the crap? And now, a feather was clenched within his arms. A black, lustrous feather. It made Northern feel ominous and incredibly disturbed. But either way, he brought it closer to his eyes and inspected it keenly. "There's nothing." His brows slowly furrowed. Then he dropped the feather on the table and walked towards the window to look around. However, he stopped midway and paused, his expression freezing with a pale realization. He slowly brought his hands to his face, and there it was. Something was written in the common language, a couple of words it seems. And Northern could read it very well. His lips moved. "We meet at the town square by dawn." No doubt about it. This was a message from Raven. But how? Northern wondered but was met with no answers. He was sure he heard the voice. Then there was someone. Then there wasn't. Then it looked like there was a bird that flew away, and it left its feather in his hands. And now, somehow, someway, there was a letter miraculously sitting on his palm. Unless Raven was into voodoo, there was certainly no reasoning that could explain this strange phenomenon. Crazy. Northern shook his head, glanced one careful look around, then slowly retreated to his bed. Crap. I must get some sleep before dawn. He curled, hugging himself while waiting for the cold hands of sleep to caress him. It wasn't hard. At first, his mind was full of thoughts and worries. But the moment he silenced them and thought nothing, everywhere got boring, and sleep naturally seeped in. Northern's eyes flung open suddenly. He shot up like a newly booted robot and looked straight through the window. Thank goodness I'm not late. The sky was orange-colored, signaling the rising of the day star. A massive orb of energy that never got tired of rising, falling and shining its light upon the world. He stood up and grabbed his bag. Immediately, Mr. Fluffy's ears erected. The beast sprang to its 4 legs, anxiously breathing. Northern was already about to leap from the window when this happened. He turned back to the beast and shook his head, slowly retreating from the window. I'm sorry, pal. I can't take you on this one. As if the beast could understand him, it let out a low, defeated whimpering. Northern neared it and caressed its massive ears. Instead, I want you to stick around Ellis and Master Annette. Make sure they are protected. He brought out a couple of soul cores from his bag and dropped them in front of the beast. Here, you can have this. He brought out more and put them separately. These are for Ellis. Then he brought out 5 more. And this is for Master Annette, her price for the information. All through, Mr. Fluffy paid rapt attention. Its blue eyes did not waver from its master, not even once. Northern patted the head of the monster and commented, "It's good. You are a very good boy." Mr. Fluffy allowed another low whimpering, but this time, it was not sounding defeated, although it still waned with a little degree of sadness. But at the very least, the beast looked like it was agreeing with the fact that Northern would be going without it. Again, I'll go now, before Ellis and Master Annette wake up. Bye, pal. Northern patted the beast one more time and waved his hand as he headed for the window. He gave Mr. Fluffy one last somber look before jumping out. The lonesome beast stared at the last of his shadow as it leaped away and quickly rushed to the window, watching as Northern landed and dashed into the forest. Even after Northern's figure was gone, Mr. Fluffy kept looking, with a solemn expression on its wolfish face. Chapter 197. Unfair Farewell, Part 2. A couple of hours later, Annette sluggishly strolled into the attic room, only to find the place empty. The white wolfish beast was sitting beside Northern's bed and looking out the window. She yawned and used her hand to wipe her eyes thoroughly. Then she looked around, her expression slowly growing inquisitive. Where did this guy go? Annette wondered internally while looking around. To her side, she observed a couple of orbs laying sparsely on the wooden floor. Then she drifted her gaze to Mr. Fluffy. "You don't happen to know where Northern ran off to, do you?" Mr. Fluffy growled lowly and slowly picked himself up, walked towards Annette, turned and sat in front of the soul cores. Using his snout, he pushed 5 of them towards Annette and growled again. Annette raised a brow. "Didn't expect you to be so smart, but I guess you are." Cautiously, with her eyes locked on the beast, she bent down and picked up the cores, then rose. After a couple of seconds of awkward silence, her voice came. "I guess North Boy left this with you? Happen to know where he went?" Mr. Fluffy growled, drawing the thick growl a bit longer, along with a somber head drop. Annette scratched her head. "Should I have taken animal language classes when I was a student?" Just at that moment, Ellis strolled in, with purpose. In fact, his eyes were almost gleaming. "Oh, hey boy, seen Northern?" Ellis' brows drew together slightly. Then slowly, as a realization settled in, he relaxed them. "New way." "No way what? What's wrong?" "Northern is gone." Her brows furrowed, and her voice came out with a little hint of confusion. "Yes, Northern is gone. Exactly what I'm seeing now. I'm not blind, boy." Ellis' expression, however, did not mind what she was saying. His eyes became cheerless and slowly fell to the ground. He seemed lost in his thoughts for a second, until Annette's voice snapped him out of it. "Do you have any idea where he is?" she inquired, the pitch of her voice climbing higher. Shuddering a little from the shock, Ellis recomposed himself and managed to speak. "He told me before that he had somewhere to go with Raven." "I see." Ellis didn't even finish his statement before Annette interrupted him. She looked down at the lonesome beast. "And he left this for who?" Ellis laid his eyes on Mr. Fluffy. He could feel a sense of kinship between the two of them in that moment. He sluggishly neared the beast and went on his knees, then began to rub its fluffy white fur. "We were both abandoned by him, weren't we?" The beast growled slowly, vibrating even the wooden floor. It was almost as if he and Ellis were communicating. Annette just watched, shaking her head. She looked out into the window. The area was slowly being illuminated by the new day's radiance, and somehow it glowed with a somber aura. Or maybe it was just the atmosphere they were in. "I hope you know what you are doing out there, boy." Then she blinked. She blinked again several times and loomed at Ellis. "Guess what, wimp?" Ellis raised his head. "Ma'am, I have North Boy's abode to myself. Stand up, you'll be helping me move my things." Ellis' brows drifted up inquisitively. "Ma'am? Move? How? It hasn't even been an hour since he left. I've been dying for a change in space. The monsters around here are dead. The monster inside the castle too is dead. Right now, this is the safest place to live. Moreover, it's practically like a mansion, you know?" Ellis just stared dumbfoundedly. He didn't think there was anything he was capable of saying in this situation. "Come, let's move. The earlier the better." He just obediently followed the master out of the mansion. A white-haired boy with a brown paper in his hands walked around the decrepit city, almost aimlessly. He stopped and stared into the map, then looked around. "Okay, this should be it." He muttered to himself and ran along a path that led him into an alley situated between 2 buildings that seemed to have been a pub, or inns. Going through the alley, he came out at a wider and less desolate clearing. The paved floors had weeds growing out from each point of interlocking. Some weeds had even bloomed green flowers. This gave the clearing an almost ethereal ambience, as if nature itself was reclaiming the once-forgotten space with its vibrant touch. The air was filled with the sweet scent of freshly bloomed flowers, mingling with the earthy aroma of the ground. It was a serene oasis amidst the urban landscape. Far ahead of him was a large, round, dried-out fountain in the center, cracked stone basins lying empty and still. Despite being tucked away, a sense of natural tranquility pervaded the area around it. Northern looked into the map and looked at the fountain. "This must be it, the town square," he muttered. Just at that instant, he felt a chill run down his spine and involuntarily shuddered. Then he quickly turned around. "You are early." Raven was approximately 6 meters away from him, approaching him with Terence behind her. She stopped in front of Northern and smiled curtly. "I'm glad you came." Northern, however, was not smiling at all. What was that just now? To him, it felt like a monster had sneaked up on him, a very powerful monster, but then it turned out to be Raven, and she was far away. Another strange thing was this wasn't the sense attributes way of perceiving things. He felt like something within him was responding to something outside. To be particular, void and chaos. But since these were all premonitions, he decided to quell them. "I can't afford to lose my guard around her at all." He was well aware of her antics and greatly suspected that he was being played into something. For now, what he needed was that airship and their cores. As long as he gets his fair share, he didn't mind being used. Of course, I'm definitely going to get back at her for it. Regardless of the pretext and post-text, being used was a lame thing. Insulting and humiliating. At the end of the day, he was bound to feel even more disgusted. So if truly he ended up falling pitifully into Raven's scheme while gaining anything worth the effort, he swore, "I'll pay her back tenfold." Northern glared at both her and Terence, then sighed. "For now, let's focus on a way home." "Come with me," Raven demanded and walked past him. Terence also did right after. He turned and watched the perfect figures of both ladies moving in front of him. Then it dawned on him for the first time. Crap! I'm the only guy. Chapter 198. The journey begins. For the next few minutes, the cohort of 3 trudged along, following each other's trails with Raven at the forefront. It was a couple of torturous minutes in pure terms of awkwardness and unfamiliarity. Never had Northern been in this situation. He wasn't used to walking with anyone. Even when he and Ellis walked together, it'd be appropriate to say he saw the boy more as a pet than an equal. Right now, there was no need to strike any conversation whatsoever. But there was also a harrowing feeling tumultuous within him due to the deafening silence. Like he needed to do something about it. But Northern knew better than to give in to that feeling, because the moment he did, that was his certified ticket to becoming a clown. He was walking with one of, perhaps, even the most manipulative person he had ever come across. Although that notion was liable to many fact checks, Northern didn't want to bother about that part of it right now. One foxy being at a time. Baby steps. Still, the silence was difficult. I didn't know I'd one day come to detest silence like this. Northern, of course, without uttering a single word, continued with the cohort. They had since left the town square and were already walking towards another forest that barricaded the edge of the city. It was a different one from the one Northern had been to a couple of days ago. It was thicker and darker, with colossal trees that could even be seen from the point where they currently traversed. The moment the visage of these trees began to come into view was when Northern started to get very itchy about asking a question. He had not been to this side of the city, and obviously it was kind of difficult following through with the map in his hands. It had even taken him a Herculean effort to find just the town square which sat right in the center of the city. He had been lost in the map a couple of minutes ago, and the most annoying thing was, all Raven said was, "Come with me." Damn it. Does she think I'm her slave or something? Northern ground his teeth and clenched his fist. Crap. The more he thought about walking forward quickly to meet her, the harder he found it to do. In his mind, he continually concocted how he would quicken his pace and just be like, "Hey, Raven, do you maybe want to tell me where we are going?" No, that sounds corny. I should try something that resounds with more confidence. Raven, where the hell are we going? Is that rude? It sounds pretty okay to me. It should be okay, right? Even though it was hard, incredibly hard. And he had no idea why. Damn, am I just a wuss? Come to think of it, I've not really spoken with many girls in this world. Even in the previous part, he was still a total nerd. The only action that could be considered divine that he performed was stroking his third leg while thinking of a girlfriend he had a secret crush on at school. He didn't even have the wit to pull ladies. Neither was he with the riz. The girl who dumped him was the one who actually noticed him, and he never thought it would turn out that way. Even when the evidences were staring at him in the face. That was how delusional and ignorant he was. Of course, he learned his lesson and worked to be better than that. But it was easier said than done. For one, he had not been in an environment where he needed to exclusively converse with girls. The few times he did while growing up, they were easy. Before his eyes, they were just a couple of kids. But this situation was different. Of course, Raven and Terence were probably not as old as Annette was, but they emanated that same aura of a lady as she did. In fact, perhaps more mulibral and elegant than her. Annette was, well, masculine, in a sense. But the two ladies moving in front of him were like walking eights. Their figures looked like something that was sculpted by some heavenly artist, one that had an obsession with perfection. Each movement caused their backsides to sway mildly. The more he focused on that mildness, however, the more explosive his heart began to beat. Quickly, he turned his face away with a tomato-reddened face. Crap! Come on, bro, what are you even doing right now? Focus. Focus. With those words, he managed to save himself from further declination and focused. In that moment, Raven stopped, causing Terence to immediately stop, and then him too. He raised a brow, wondering, what's wrong now? They were standing at the very border that parted the city from the forest, although there were no visible signs or wall indicating or making obvious the partition. Is something wrong, Light? Terence asked with a serene tone. Her voice made goosebumps crawl up Northern's skin. Perhaps it was the eerie beauty of her voice in the silence, or the fact that he had carried some nonsense thoughts before now. Either way, he didn't want to think about it. Luckily, Raven's bland and uninteresting voice was in time to save the day. I know you have probably been wondering where exactly we are going, she said. Northern swallowed his spit internally without a waver of expression. He stared blankly at her, putting on the best tough front he could muster as she continued. I wanted to be sure that we are away from the city. That part caused his brows to rise a little, but rather than cut her halfway, he wanted her to make her point. First matter of importance was knowing where the hell they were going. Like I said, our original destination is somewhere really far, but in order for us to get to that place, we'd have to carry out a series of indecent operations. Northern felt his lips uncontrollably begin to curl up. And here I was thinking this fox was a hero of justice. Indecent, you say? Hoarsely as usual. The words rang, but this time with a subtle hint of disdain. Yes. Need me to explain? Her eyes burrowed into him, like those of a diabolical sentry petrified by a burden incomprehensible by mortal minds. He wouldn't lie. There was something scary at the same time annoying, hiding deep within her sharp crimson glare. Of course, do I need to tell you that? He responded and looked away for a second. Raven looked down, hesitating for a brief beat, but she spoke before a second passed. Looking up into Northern's eyes, hers igniting with a dangerous spark. Well, it's not much, she said. First we have to go to the Sloria Nation stronghold, find a way to enter without their permission, because they will never give us their permission. Then we have to kill a human whom I owe a death grudge. Then we have to steal from a sage. I don't know if stealing from him without killing him will be possible, so if worse comes to worst, we might have to kill the sage too. Northern's jaw went slack. His mouth parting open slowly as the weight of Raven's words sank in. All of that, and she just said it so casually? Chapter 199, Dawn of a Hypocrite. Northern stood aloof for some seconds. He craned his neck to stare at the sky a little bit. Then, as he brought his head down, he nodded. Yeah, I knew this was a stupid idea. What was I doing believing the nonsense you spoke of? He rolled the map and tucked it into his bag, then gave Raven a pitiful look. Good luck in your future endeavors, young lady. Whether it is to kill a sage or steal from one, I don't care. You are just insane. That's what you are. A barely visible frown formed on Raven's face, almost a contortion of puzzlement. I don't understand. What about this plan displeases you? Northern had turned around and was about to walk away when he heard her. He paused, fiercely gritting his teeth within closed lips. It felt as though her words were deliberately aimed to prickle him, because what other explanation could there be? It is very likely that she's doing this intentionally. Calm down, was what he said to himself. But on the contrary, it wasn't easy to calm down at all. Not in this situation. What displeases me? Wait, are you serious right now? I thought you had a sensible and realistic plan to getting this airship. Raven frowned slightly and nodded. Yes, I do. And it involves stealing from a sage and killing someone you have a grudge on. She nodded. Yes, it does. Her response was so casual and natural. It was obvious to Northern in her tone that she was not seeing what he was, at least not until he said it. Wait, are you really insane? If I follow you correctly, you plan to kill 2 humans? Not monsters, but humans. Yes. How are they any different? Northern froze for a moment. He jerked his head back slowly, frowning in unbelief, then slowly leaned his face forward and tilted his head. How? How are they any different? Are you insane? How can you even say that? Raven stared silently at him, her eyes resolute and cold, betraying not even the slightest hint of emotions, even in this tense conversation. She recounted a couple of breaths before opening her mouth and saying, Yes, North, there's no difference between the two. Both entities have a flame of existence that can be extinguished. Let me ask you a question. How did you feel when you had your first kill, when you heard Ul's voice for the first time? Northern raised a brow and folded his arms. He tried to sincerely remember. Nothing. Raven's gaze rested indifferently on him for a while. Nothing could be said of them, but he felt very uncomfortable with those red eyes boring into his soul. What? He inquired with a tone of arrogance. You, North, should check yourself. At least, a lot of us here experience a terrifying trauma during our first kill. But if it's nothing for you, perhaps the one that is insane is you and not me. She breathed before continuing. For one, I think you should start off by not being a hypocrite. Northern's frown furrowed darkly. He gripped the cross arm of his bottomless bag and stomped forward, fuming. What? Me? A hypocrite? Says you who hails a just cause and search for a way to please all, but behind the scenes doesn't mind doing something indecent. I mean, aren't you supposed to be a hero of some sort? And you are going to just swoop into some stronghold and kill some humans like they are monsters. This is not even to say that you are talking about a sage. Raven shook her head. I am not a hero, North. The people only made me to be such, and it's not my duty to live up to it. I am merely doing what I want to do. It's not my fault that they have raised monumental images of me in their heads. Do not judge me. With that, she turned. Let's go, Terrence. She stopped and looked back over her shoulder. I don't know what exactly is your concern with indecency when it's the very thing that you've represented ever since you got to this stronghold. Drop the act and just be selfish already. She faced front and walked away with Terrence. Northern stood there for a couple of seconds, feeling the sharp edges of her words sting him from the inside. The most annoying thing was he couldn't ascertain. He couldn't tell whether her words were true or false, and he wanted to be honest with himself at the very least. Was he truly being a hypocrite? But really, killing humans, isn't it going too far? Still, if it came down to it, he didn't feel like he'd think twice before making the decision. Northern moved his head and touched his chest. Once again, he couldn't help but feel this intangible and fleeting emptiness. It was subtle and almost unnoticeable, but it made him very uncomfortable. He looked to the front. Raven and Terrence had long disappeared into the dark embrace of the forest. As uncomfortable as this journey was bound to be, Northern felt like perhaps this was another ordeal for him to cross. Or maybe not. To be honest, he didn't really care about all of that. Ordeal or no ordeal. I just want the ship. And he was going to do anything to get it. Even if it meant playing as Raven wanted. Of course, his promise to pay her back still stood. And most importantly, this was another amazing opportunity for him to grow. Perhaps, this time around, he could start to put deliberate effort into getting stronger and not leaving it to chance. Meanwhile, Terence and Raven were walking into the forest. As their steps went further, the darkness got deeper and stronger, threatening to swallow them in fact. Terence glanced at Raven a couple of times, saying nothing. However, the young lady had since caught her glances. When she was tired, she eventually asked, "What? Are you going to leave him like that? I thought you said you can't do this without him." Raven's lips curled up a little. "But he'll come. He'll come." Terence's face contorted into a pool of confusion. "How are you so sure?" Raven shrugged. "I don't know, I just have this feeling." Terence stared at her as they walked, blinking. Then she commented with a low tone. "Light, I really do hope you're fine." "I am," she replied with a small smile. "You've been acting." Raven stopped and looked back. "He's coming." Her smile formed fully for the first time in a long time, perhaps ever. It caused Terence's eyes to widen slowly. This right here was the most beautiful she had ever seen Raven light. Chapter 200, Permission to Evolve. "Sir?" Northern stared fiercely at both of them. "What?" His tone rang out with heavy arrogance, almost resounding through the hollowness of the imposing grove. "Nothing. I'm impressed." "Don't be. The only reason why I am on this journey with you is to take that airship and fly home. I don't care whatever you intend to do, whether it is to save the world or destroy it." Raven smiled a little and erased it. "Fair enough." She turned around. "Then, let's go." "No, no, no, I'm not going to have that." Raven turned back around. "What this time? What this time? What the hell is she smoking?" Northern inhaled deeply and exhaled. Then he said, "Look, we are on this mission as partners. I know you are giving me some prizes, but I believe we are here because you need my help. Isn't that right?" Raven lingered, then nodded. "Yes, you are right." "Fine, if that is the case, I demand to know everything that you are planning down to explicit detail. And I demand to be treated as an equal, not like some kid that you're taking on excursions." Raven let out a deep sigh. "I do treat you as an equal, and I plan to tell you everything, but not while standing here. We need to go farther away from the city before I can explicitly explain to you." Now that she mentioned it again, it got concerning. Northern narrowed his eyes a little bit and asked, "What's it about the city that you are running away from?" "A lot of things. For one, I don't trust Gilbert, Annette, and the twins. Something is off. I don't think I can trust them to end this, so I'm just going to do this on my own." Northern's head moved back a little, blinking with surprise. "Wow, she's perceptive. I give her that. Why? Why don't you trust him?" "I can't tell you because they are only my premonitions as of now. Whatever the case may be, I am going to end this on my own." "So, you are going to challenge 3, or is it 4 rifts on your own?" Raven was silent after his question. Her hair swayed a little as she made a slight head movement. She lowered her eyes, then moved them back to Northern's ethereal gaze. "Who said challenging the rifts is the only way out of this?" You?" Northern raised his eyebrow in confusion, then furrowed them immediately after. Raven was silent, causing the howling wind of the grove to grow louder. Then, after a couple of breezing seconds, she said, "North, why don't we just keep going for now? I'll tell you everything on the way." Northern looked at Terence, who had been standing like a statue all the while, not even her breath interrupting the atmosphere. She was almost invisible. He sighed and responded, "Fine." With that, the cohort continued their journey. After the short discussion, it was a bit more bearable to walk with them, and instead of walking behind, he walked right beside Raven with Terence on the other side. A couple of minutes into their preceding steps, a lot of distance had been covered, and luckily, they were yet to encounter any monsters. I wonder if it's because of Dark Terror. There was no way to know if Dark Terror had hunted to this point, but he did remember passing a staunch command to the devil, which was the annihilation of every monster that surrounded the capital. The only thing was that he wasn't sure if Dark Terror had been able to annihilate all before he was called back, since he was burning away his reservoir of void essence. I wonder just when he'd be able to act independently. The fact that Dark Terror needed his essence to manifest and operate was a great hindrance and an even greater limitation in what they could accomplish together. The ratio of essence it consumed was even greater when it was using its abilities. Just like Northern had observed while he was in the dungeon cell. His guess was probably the fact that Dark Terror had not evolved yet. He summoned the runes of the monster's profile to confirm something. However, what he saw blew his mind. Name Dark Terror. True name. Singularity. Attributes. Chaos Thread. Spawn of Void. Chaos and Void. Attributes ability. Void Flames. Darkness Embrace. Chaos Berserk. Danger Level. Devil. Soul Rank. Hellion. Soul Fragments. 300/300. Talent. Nil. Talent Class. Nil. Talent Ability. Nil. Perhaps it was because he had nothing to do this time. Northern had belatedly guessed that the main reason he probably didn't gain talent fragments from monsters that Dark Terror killed was because the monster itself absorbed their souls. Since talent was a core imbued in the soul, it's safe to say that those talent fragments Northern would have gained in particular were being eaten up as shards mixed with the fragments of souls that Dark Terror absorbed. And he had just summoned these runes to look at how far those soul fragments had probably gone. He didn't take note of the number the first time he had summoned Dark Terror's profile. Aside from the fact that it was dark, the matters at hand were pressing. Maybe he did notice it but just failed to think about it since they were more to worry about. However, none of all that mattered now. Northern could feel his heart beat heavily as he took one step after another. On one side of his heart, he was trying so much to put himself under control. This was a very exciting situation indeed, but any strange behavior would warrant questions from Raven. And let's not forget the lie detector was traveling with them. Not just now, but throughout their journey, Northern understood very well that he had to beware of the young Oracle Lady. On the other side of his heart, he leaped with so much joy. It was the joy of uncertainty. That feeling when you feel something good is about to happen, but you don't just know what. Just when his joy was reaching its peak, a panel appeared in front of his eyes. Soul Summon. Dark Terror is beckoning on your approval to get stronger. Evolution is possible. Enter the limitless void to commence evolution. Northern's eyes widened for a moment. It was getting harder by the second to quiet down his running heart. Crap! I need to enter the limitless void. Raven finally turned to him, asking casually, "Is everything okay?"